Good evening and welcome to the 2022 virtual Great Lakes Fishing Show. I'm your host, Chris Larson, along with Trevor Sumption from Fishhawk. Just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and joining the show. It promises to be a really good show. We're excited about all the guests we have this evening. And without further ado, we're going to bring in the first one, and he is Captain Dan Keating. Captain Dan, how are you doing tonight? All right, now we got you, Captain.
All right.
We had you muted down. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We are doing awesome. It is great to have you here. You've had a busy last few months. You've been kind of on the road doing some salmon schools. You were in Ludington, Michigan this past weekend. Tell us about what you've got going on right now.
Yeah, no, we've been just kind of moving around, doing two different salmon schools this year, doing a salmon foundations, which is a more basics, more of a tune-up kind of course. And then doing our advanced tactics and seasonal strategy school, which is more in depth, and we go deep into currents and how to find salmon and trout. And it's been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of new people this year getting into it. At some of the schools, there's been anywhere from a third to a half of the attendees are, multi-species fishermen with not a lot of experience. So it's exciting to see our sport growing.
Have any of those anglers, Dan, have they kind of shared what's drawing them to the Great Lakes at this point? Or have you kind of got any of that feedback at all? Or
I think a lot of it is that people just want to be outdoors, and I think the fishing has been on an upswing. I definitely think that state record king caught last year is pulling a lot of people to the lake.
Right. Big fish.
Yeah, and people are adjusting their expectations. Everybody wants to get a boat full of kings, but people are learning how to fish for steelhead, capitalize on the really good coho fishing, and lake trout are kind of getting, a lot of people are starting to target them as well. So,
it's kind of been interesting. We've noticed that the last couple of years, just in talking to our customers, where before, like, it used to shut off at Labor Day. Everybody would put the boats away and king fishing's over with and whatever. And all of a sudden, we're talking to people, really quite late into the fall, where it seems like you're right. Like, they're fishing for, they're kind of taking advantage of some of the opportunities that, that are kind of out there, on many of the lakes. So.
Yeah. I think also a lot more guys are not afraid to venture out to deeper water. Like you mentioned, that late fall fishing, that was when I was chartering full time. That was probably my favorite time of the year to fish, was late October, just because there's no one out there and you can get into the 2 and 3 year old kings and steelhead in deep water. So people are venturing offshore, and I think people are sharing more information. I think you're definitely, your Fishhawk probes are helping guys understand the currents better, which they'll then definitely be more successful if they can understand the currents.
If anyone has any questions for Captain Dan Keating, go ahead and put them in the comments. Doesn't matter if you're on YouTube or Facebook. We're going to see those questions for Captain Dan. And again, tonight, the question of the segment is going to get a Fishhawk swag package. So we'll take care of that for you. So if you got questions for Captain Dan, let us know here. We've got him here up until 7:20 Eastern tonight before we get our next guest. But you've been doing these salmon schools, and you've been telling me that you've got a lot of new people out there. What's kind of the barriers if someone's thinking about going from being an inland fisherman only to getting out on the big water? What are some of the kind of common barriers that you're seeing at these salmon schools?
I think, a lot of people, they're learning that if they pick their day, obviously you have to pick the day if you've got a boat that's in that 16 to 22 foot range. But a lot of the multi-species fishermen's boats, they're, plenty able to handle the Great Lakes when the weather's good. One of the things that we try to do is, for the newer anglers, is just help make sense out of the tackle, because there's so much different tackle out there that you can use. It can be overwhelming. So we boil it down, to, the different presentations. I always encourage people, just start with a few, learn how to run 6 rods really well, and then go from there. You can build it from your downriggers and your divers and your coppers and lead cores. And it's really something with a little bit of knowledge, people can be really dangerous out on that lake to the fish populations.
So you're going to send them out there with 6 rods. How should they get started? What kind of presentations, if someone's just getting started in trolling, what kind of presentations should they start with?
Well, a big part's going to depend on where they're fishing and the time of year they start. But typically, if you're starting anytime in the spring, there's a lot of fish in the upper layers of the water column, and you can get at them with mono side planers, running planer boards, mono line off the surface with dodgers and flies, crankbaits with fluorocarbon leaders, even some spoons. And then you start adding downriggers and like the Dreamweaver deeper divers to the spread. If someone doesn't have downriggers, like kayak fishermen, then the torpedoes are really effective ways to get your line down. So that's kind of, you're building that spring fishing off of fishing in that shallow water, whether it's for cohos or for browns or maybe steelhead. And then you start adding, if you haven't put downriggers on the boat, putting the downriggers on the boat, and then you start adding your copper and your lead core lines. And I tell people, just start with a few setups. You don't need 10 of everything to start out.
All right, we're getting a few questions now. Steve Morris over on YouTube wants to know if you recommend using scent.
Do I recommend using scent? I had a couple years where I was like really militant about putting scents or different things on my lures, and I didn't think it helped me or hurt me any. So I'm not really I don't have a strong opinion on that. But definitely don't put sunscreen on your lures. Definitely be careful with your hands when you're doing
I'd probably throw bug spray into that same category, and don't put bug spray in your screens either. That's
well, yeah, and a lot of people don't realize, because you would see this with charter customers. They get on the boat and they take the aerosol, right, and they just start spraying. I do believe that aerosol residue could settle down on your deck and make it slippery, and definitely get on your lures. So definitely don't want that on the lures.
So we'll add that to the list with bananas. Bananas, spray on sunscreen. Those are on the list.
All right, we've got a question from YouTube here. DCR wants to know, what's the number one consideration regarding current?
Wow. Well, that's here's the short answer. That's a hard one to answer with the amount of time that we have here. I could take up all that time. The number one consideration is experience. The more experience you have with the current, and then being observant of the currents when you're out there, what you're going to do is you're going to build up a reservoir of how the water's moving off of your port. And really, whether you fish on Eastern Lake Ontario or Southern Lake Michigan or wherever, every wind regime, every time the wind's out of the south or the northwest or whatever, the currents are going to do the same thing with that wind. When the wind switches, the current is going to reverse. So the short answer is to know over time what the currents do every time the wind's out of the south or the north. And once you understand that, you're gonna learn where the fish are gonna move, because the currents are what move the fish. And if you can figure that out, you know where to go before you put your rods in the water. And that's that's part of it. And then dialing in the current. We've got 2 more salmon schools coming up, so that'd be a good way to unpack that one.
Yeah, for sure. 2 more salmon schools coming up. You're going to be in Two Rivers, Wisconsin this weekend. Then you're heading over to Michigan the week after. If somebody wants to join in with that and find out more about it, how do they do that, and how do they get signed up to go to one of those salmon schools?
Yeah, they can just go to CaptainDanKeating.com. That's got the schedule on it. And you can sign up right there for Two Rivers next week, or we're going to be in the UP of Michigan. One of my favorite places to do these at, because the people up there are definitely hardcore fishermen, and they really take it seriously. So they're a lot of fun to talk to. Or you can just message me through Facebook or whatever, and I can get you information.
Very good. Here's one from Facebook. It's Terry Armstrong. He wants to know, do diver colors really matter?
Well, there's a lot of opinions on that, so I'll give you my opinion. I used to have 2 favorite colors. Now I have 3, thanks to Jim Parquette. But I always like just the white, plain white or glow, whatever you want to call it. Green. But the last 2 summers, the clear deeper diver, the Magnum with UV tape, has been probably one of the better ones.
All right. If you guys are on there in the comments section, I see Captain Lance Valentine in there answering some questions too. So feel free to shop around there. Lots of good information getting shared out there. Here we got one from Jeremy Maslowski on YouTube. He wants to know if you could run only one flasher fly combo, what would you run on Lake Michigan? And also spoons, what would be your number one choice there?
I don't think it'd go out if I could only run one. No. If I could only run one flasher and fly, it's gonna be a real simple, white hot spot with UV tape on one side, lead tape on the other, and either a Howie bullfrog or a crinkle green. And if I could only run one spoon, it would be any time of the year. That's the hard part because you got favorites for spring, summer, fall, but any time of the year would maybe be the UV Green Dolphin Super Slim or the regular smaller size Green Flounder Pounder Moonshine. And I just did 2 for year 1. Sorry.
That's good. Okay, so here's an easy one and a hard one all at the same time. It's actually a two-parter. One easy, one hard. What's the biggest king that you can recall reeling in? This is from Steve V over on YouTube, by the way. And then, so what's the biggest king you can recall reeling in? And then the second part, the hard part is, when hunting for that lunker, do you think less or more?
Okay, so for me reeling in,
We'll call it your boat. How's that?
Okay, I've spent my life watching everyone else reel fishing, but I did get a 32 pounder when I was in high school. I got a 32 pounder off of, so that's my biggest.
So I can say I have caught as big a king salmon as Dan Keating. That actually makes me feel really good.
Yeah, no, but my client's 36 pounds. And do I think less is more? A lot of times it seems like the really big fish are caught on boats, don't have a lot of lines in the water. So might be. I know sometimes for the middle of the day, you have to have a rod. I find that if I have a rod all by itself, with nothing else around it, and when it's bright and sunny, those ones will seem to catch bigger fish than other rods. So yeah, times less is more for kings, especially in the middle of the day.
All right. Here's one from YouTube again. It's Chris Hardy. He wants to know, what do you recommend when the lake flips in midsummer?
Ooh, Big Water Wisdom. I talk a lot about that. Shameless plug for my latest book. But what I recommend doing is when the lake flips, cold water comes in. And if you don't have access to any information, I run parallel to the shore and zigzag from the beach, as in 6, 7, 8 feet of water out to maybe 30 feet. Kind of see if there's bait in there. If you see seagulls sitting on the water, that's a sign there's alewives. If you don't see anything in there, sometimes the fish don't come in with an upwelling. Sometimes the fish will actually blow further out into the lake after an upwelling, especially when before the upwelling, the bait was in the upper part, up in the thermocline and above, and the salmon will follow it out. So I'm stubborn, so I would typically even try and shallow, even if I didn't think there might be fish there, but I would not give it more than a half hour, 45 minutes, hour at the most, and then rip and run deep.
So here's proof positive that you're never too experienced to learn. And this is from Captain Lance Valentine himself. If you're catching fish going north or south and then turn around and notice a difference in probe speed, is your first thought to change the speed to match what was working? Or are you thinking about getting back through the fish fast and turning back around to go north-south again?
Lance, are we going walleye fishing this spring?
I think you can hold him hostage and say, I will only answer that question if you take me walleye fishing this spring. That's how I would approach that one. I think.
Yeah, because if I remember right, before all this COVID nonsense started, we talked about going walleye fishing. But anyhow, okay, so the first time you turn around, you had that hot pass, 3, 4, 5 fish, whatever, you turn around. Your probe speed's different. I'm going to go back through those fish, even though my probe speed's different, but I am going to be adjusting my speed all constantly, like every minute or so. And I'll just be kind of tweaking angles, getting through it to see if I can come up with a different speed that works on those fish. Then let's say we don't get any bites and we flip it around and we come back through and catch all the fish again. Sure. Then the next time I go back, I may just be trucking fast, trying to get through it. Or if you're not fishing a lot of lines and everybody on the boat knows how to reel a rod in, a lot of guys, especially tournament guys, they'll actually reel all their lines in and motor back upstream, so to speak, and come back.
Just because what's happening at that angle. Let me ask just a general question here from the schools. Do you see when you do these schools in different port towns, different areas around the Great Lakes. Are the questions the same, or does each port bring to you a unique set of questions or challenges?
Okay, great question. There are certain, just like if your kids play soccer, there's the fundamental tactical stuff of dribbling a soccer ball. Okay, there are certain basic things that just come up over and over again. Those questions are the same everywhere. But there are, when you get into different regions, then you get this whole nother group of questions that are based more on the region. So.
All right, Dan, we wanted to have you on today. Obviously, we could have you on for hours answering questions, but we want to help you out a little bit too. You've got some awesome books and DVDs. Tell us a little bit about your book collection. We already talked a little bit about the salmon schools and how people can get involved there, but I know you've got a book that came out recently in the last year, but just kind of go through the books and give people an idea of what they should be looking for if they're interested in a few different books.
Yeah, the most recent book is Big Water Wisdom. This was my wife's idea. Came out last year. It's the most up to date. It has over 500 questions and answers. Guys, our brain is like we ask a lot of questions. And it's topically organized. So the questions are in categories. And what people are telling me that this book is super, super easy to read because it's bite-sized pieces of information. And it's my hope that people will actually take this book, take this book, have it on your boat. You're out fishing. Where do the fish go when there's an upwelling? Oh, that's in the chapter on currents, etc. The next most recent book is Essential Tactics and Seasonal Strategies. This is just a really good all-around multi-species book. Talks about each of the different species and how to find them and catch them throughout the year. Keating on Kings, the brown book, is all about king salmon. 256 pages on kings. Having written a book, a lot of visual learners are out there, so we made 2 DVDs, Keating on Kings Part 1 and 2. There's a lot of stuff in the DVDs that are in the book, but there's a certain amount of stuff in here that didn't come out in the book, but on video comes out. And going to be actually coming out with some new DVDs actually this year. We're actually going to have them on thumb drives for the younger guys because I was told this weekend a lot of people don't have DVD players anymore.
True story. And
then we got the light blue book, The Complete Troller's Guide. This is the oldest book. It's a real basic, simple book. And a lot of people have told me that they use this. This is like ground zero for them for the basics. And then Angling Life is more of my story. Uses fishing as a metaphor to look at life. So that's it.
Very cool. We've got about a minute left. Tell us, we got one more question here. This one's from Facebook. William O. Baker says, do you have a preference, big boards or online boards? He's asking specifically on Lake Ontario, but why don't you give us your favorite salmon answer to that question?
Oh, I like inline boards. They're easier to use, especially if you're fishing in traffic. And with that planer board, whether it's the Ninja board or a church board, they're going up and down in the waves, and kind of each board is bobbing, and then you've got a copper line off of there or a torpedo SWR rig off of there. You're getting way more action on that board. So definitely go with inlines.
All right, Captain Dan Keating, really appreciate you coming on, joining us tonight. Like I said, we could have you on for hours talking.
Yeah, I was going to say, the questions are just boom, 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 boom.
Right.
Yeah.
But really appreciate you taking some time and answering some questions. Again, if you want to find out more about Captain Dan and the different resources that he has available, you can go to CaptainDanKeating.com. And our winner for that one is going to be Jeremy Maslowski from YouTube. Jeremy, head over to Facebook and send us a little message with your address, and we'll get that stuff out to you. Captain Dan Keating, always a pleasure talking to you. Really appreciate you coming on, and safe travels out there, and hope you can continue to spread the word and grow our sport.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for doing this for all of us.
Yep.
Thank you, Dan. Coming up next, we've got another fan favorite. It seems like I said, we've got the all-star list here tonight, and this guy is another all-star. We're going to bring him on.
This is usually when I go for a bathroom day. when Ross goes. Actually, so in all seriousness, though, before we got on the air, someone, I think it was on Facebook, asked, I wonder how many years of experience are going to be on the show tonight, and it's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
So,
Between Captain Dan Keating and then this guy, Ross Robertson, Ross, how are we doing tonight?
Good to see you guys. It feels like we just did this a little bit ago up in St. Paul, but looking forward to doing it again.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we had you on to talk some ice fishing with us on the other show on the Fish House Nation podcast. If you guys are interested in some ice fishing information, go over there. That's our other show. But Ross got you on today talking some different stuff. We're going to talk a little Gloomis and Shimano. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with Gloomis. What did you want to talk about there? What's new there?
I think the question that I get all the time, and this is, again, it doesn't matter if you're just walleye fishing or whatever, is when you look at the rod lineups. Like I worked with those guys to develop a new rod that primarily was going to be used for spinner fishing, like braided line, dead sticking, stuff like that. And it's actually marketed under the Shimano Compre brand. And it's a more moderate rod. And so basically, I think there's a lot of confusion, and I understand that because, you look at these things nowadays, we're always looking online, looking on thumb drives and stuff like that. We're not seeing the visual on this. Is a moderate rod, for lack of a better, layman's term, it's going to bend more, and it's not going to be as fast or as stiff. And, that's really advantageous when you're fishing live bait or you have braided line. It doesn't have that stretch. And we just came out with that new rod. So we've got two 8'3" Compres. And between those two rods, that's probably 90-some% of what I use. And I can't tell you how many people have asked me, like, what's the difference in these rods? They kind of appear to be the same. But I can tell you, if you were to spinner fish with the faster rod, you're going to lose a lot of fish. You're not going to feel a lot of fish. And the same thing goes for like braided line. So that little extra give in there is really, really advantageous. And I know some of your salmon guys have, can probably correlate some of that over there as well. So,
and are those are the same? The medium action one is one labeled moderate, one labeled fast, or how do they? What's kind of their naming?
Yeah, I think it's just one is MDD is the new one, and that's the more moderate one. So we've got moderate, and then we've got moderate fast. And the original one is definitely, I think too, that the big thing that you realize, it's kind of like when you start looking at brand A, B, C, and D, like what they're calling medium from brand 1, 2, 3, and 4 is often quite a bit different. And that's one of the reasons I really like, Gloomis for my, like, what I'm going to call it in-hand rods, if you will. So if I'm jigging or ice fishing or something like that, because the rods are really, really technique specific. So when you look at them, and let's say like an SJR, so that's spinning jig rod. So we know it's a jig rod, we know it's a spinning rod, and like a 782, for example. So that means that rod is 78 inches. That's the first two numbers. And that last two is going to be the power. So a 2 power, which is basically a medium. So a light is going to be a 1, kind of a medium heavy is a 3, and then a like heavy would be a 4. So really a big advantage when you look at other options out there. They don't cover what Gloomis does. So it's really nice that, let's say you're drop shotting and you want an extra fast rod. So basically that tip, and I know this may be kind of difficult, but I brought some little ice rods because I figured it might be easier to get in there. But this is an extra fast. And so this is a solid blank on one of the ice rods like this, but you can see it's almost like what a drop shot rod would be. We've got a really fast tip, but then we kick into some really good backbone. And then, this is more of a fast rod, and you go, well, what's the difference? Well, that other one I would use for, like, if we're going to talk ice fishing for a second, like I would use that for like jig heads, tungsten, stuff like this, where this is like a little spoon rod for me, a little blade bait. Like I use this one as my favorite little perch rod for using with little rattle baits, like ripping wraps and stuff like that. And then when you get into the walleye rods, like as an example here, this is a 392, which is a 2 power medium. So like if we're regular doing stuff, I would say up to maybe 3/8, quarter and 3/8. This is awesome. And then we get into a 3 power. This stuff really does make a difference, because that rod that I just showed you, if I put a 1/2 or a 3/4 ounce jigging spoon on it, it's just going to be like a jello. So whether you're ice fishing or open water fishing, it doesn't matter. You want that rod to be able to have some, to be able to carry that lure, so that you not only can set the hooks. So here's a 3 power. You can see how much faster or heavier that is. But you want that to be able to, when you jig and you stop, the thing just doesn't like a wave. You don't want that bungee, because you won't be able to feel the fish. You won't be able to present that lure. And that's obviously really important ice fishing. But I think sometimes that's overlooked as well when you're, fishing jigs, just about anything really.
I think one of the things that I, just as a consumer, with what's happened with online shopping, right? I mean, buying fishing rods and then trying to buy those online versus seeing them in the store. I think that's where maybe a lot of the questions come from when you start talking about actions and blank speeds and this kind of thing, because now it's a little more difficult sometimes to be able to go in and actually shake that rod or feel that rod versus when you bought every rod in store. So.
Right. And I'm not trying to steal a thunder, but I did a thing just because of that for In Fisherman that they've got on, I think, their YouTube channel and their webpage, showing the rods at the same time being bent and what the difference on that is. And I guess really a quick kind of rod lesson that I know you guys probably know, but the difference between action and power. So power is basically like how much weight that is going to take, how heavy a line we could use. So that's light, medium, heavy, whatever. And again, on G Loomis, that's like 1, 2, 3, and 4. They have a number assigned with those. So it makes it really easy to quickly look at that, or like you said, look in the catalog or whatever. But then the flip of that is the action. So we've got like moderate, we've got moderate fast, we have extra fast. And that's basically how much curve, in really layman's terms. I'm sure some serious hardcore rod guys are going to go nuts on me for that, but basically how much bend you have on that rod. And so like a crankbait rod for bass guys, they want it to be soft or more moderate so that they're not pulling hooks out and they don't have that. They can let that fish kind of load up on it. And that's really the same thing a walleye guy like me wants when we're fishing live bait, especially when we're dead sticking or we're using braided line, because monofilamen's got 20-some% stretch, right? So on that faster action rod that I'm using for my crankbaits, I've got that mono on there at 20-some%. Now all of a sudden I'm using some braided line and it's got 3 to 5% stretch. That give has to go somewhere, and in this case, I just use that softer rod or a more moderate rod, and that's going to make sure you have a lot less hooks pull out, and also it's going to change the action. When you have a rod and it's very stiff and you have braided line on it, it is really, really herky jerky. Like listening to Dan there talking about, he wanted that with the inline boards. Generally speaking, with us walleye guys, we want to reduce that surge because I can always impart more, but it's much more difficult to have less.
So here's a kind of a general question from Steve Connolly over on Facebook that I think kind of sums it up. And again, maybe put this in the context of somebody that's newer to trolling or kind of just getting set up. So if you kind of had to pick one, what speed rod are you gonna choose? For most of your trolling. When
you say what speed, you mean like power? Or?
Yeah, I think we're referring to action there.
That's a tough one only because I'm not going to pick on other manufacturers, but if you go like you nailed it. I mean, if you're looking and you're trying to buy stuff online, man, that's a tough deal because from manufacturer to manufacturer, what they're calling and the different, materials that they're using, if they're more composite, how much bend is in there. You can look at 3 rods and from 3 different manufacturers have the exact same so-called specs on them. And you put them in your hand and you got 3 totally different rods there. But generally speaking, for me, I want a rod that's going to be, those 2 compres, obviously, but 8 foot, 8.5 foot, right in that range. You get too much longer, netting and storage becomes difficult. I like a telescoping rod. I hate 2-piece rods when avoidable. So all my board rods are those telescoping rods, and they telescope down really easy, which is great in the garage or obviously in the boat. And I'm looking for that kind of, just enough give on the tip that I'm not going to rip hooks out and my stuff's going to be pulled through with the boards fine, but not so stiff or soft that I'm not going to be able to get hooks into them. So that's why those 2 rods, if you check out those 8'3" compres, are perfect for me. Now, some guys like, shorter rods or longer rods, more power to you. There's personal preference there. But when you get much shorter than 8 foot, in my opinion, we lose a lot of that shock absorber, and we also lose our spread. So when I kind of put those out, in my moose ears, I got Big Bert's custom tackle trees and different rod holders there, riser cradles. I'm trying to extend my reach. I'm trying to get those line angles so they're not going to touch the water. And so that rod is just an extension of what we're doing. It's kind of like grabbing a hammer. Do you want to grab it right below the head or at the bottom of the handle? It's going to give me more leverage for sure. So, but there becomes a point of diminishing returns. You get something so long, now all of a sudden netting's more difficult, things like that. But ultimately, I would tell you when people are looking at things is find something that works for you, buy one of this, buy one of that, and then ultimately that's what you need to be using for everything. Whatever you settle in, it's most important, I think, as long as you're kind of close, to have everything the same. I mean, that's so important. The continuity with trolling is so important.
All right, Ross, you kind of answered Ryan's question here. Ryan wanted to know what your go-to rod for inline boards is and why. He's asking power, length, and action. So maybe just answer the back part of it. Do these rods, do they play any kind of part in being able to read those boards?
Absolutely. Because, if you have a rod that's too stiff, it's gonna rip that board and make it more difficult. It's gonna be more herky jerky. It's gonna be a lot more difficult in order to actually read what's going on there. But then if we have one that's really soft, those fish can kind of come up there and hang on that, and as you kind of ride in the waves and such, and it's gonna be much more difficult to see them as well. And then again, think about what's going on. We've got stretch in that line. I mean, even if you're using braid line, there's some stretch in there. But if you're using monofilament, like I prefer to do for a majority of my presentations, when you've got 150 feet of line out from the board to the rod tip to the lure, there's a lot of stuff that can go in there, and you've got to definitely have the right package. So.
All right, you've been talking a little bit of ice fishing, and we're going to bring JMO's question in here. It is an ice fishing question. Make it quick. Top 3 ice fishing lures for you for walleyes.
You've got to have some type of rattle spoon. You've got to have some type of horizontal bait, glide style bait, and you've got to have a plain lead head jig. Something just a real basic deal that's kind of a closer or a dead stick. You find the right, deal for your neck of the woods and have one of those 3 always tied on. You can kind of rotate through, and that's a go-to pattern.
All right, you right now are transitioning from ice mode. I know you've been out there the last few weeks and just wrapping that up. So you're getting the open water stuff ready. What are some things that you're doing right now to get yourself ready for the open water season?
We work, I was on the ice about 6 weeks straight. But truthfully, I mean, we work a lot farther out. I ordered all my ice gear, for the manufacturers that I work with in July. So when it's 100 degrees out, that's when we're actually doing that stuff. So almost all of my work, I would say, is done because I have to work on a much longer timeline. I've got to have everything tied, ready to go like that. Only thing I don't really do until I get a little closer is the final respool on my game rods. So I've got 2 sets of rods and reels that I use, so I always kind of have some backups. So I won't do my final respool until we get a little bit closer here, probably in the next week or so. But I still got a few sport shows and things that I got to kind of go and do. We're rigging up one of our other guide boats, putting some new stuff on, and kind of one of the blessings and the curses of what I do is we get to try a lot of new gear. And while that sounds great, kind of trying to learn some of that stuff that we have to hide and can't show anybody because we're trying to get the kinks out of it before that's released next year. That's a lot of the stuff that we're doing. That's why we don't show it because I'd have my tail kicked for that. But kind of learning some of that new stuff is definitely a big part of my early season prep.
We talked rods right out of the gate. What's happening over on the reel department as far as in the trolling reels themselves?
With rods, I mean, and those compres are not what I'm going to call an expensive, especially with you figure the warranty and all that stuff. They're under $100, I think. The reels are more expensive. That's the one thing I try to tell the guys, and I don't know how many of my guide clients, probably more than half my guide clients own a boat, and they work with me just to kind of try to learn some more stuff all the time. And I tell these guys till I'm blue in the face, and they find out every one of them the hard way. Do not buy a cheap reel because a good one is going to last an average, guy a really, really long time, like perhaps even their career. I've still got some trolling reels that are 20 some years old and they see, 150 to 200 days a year. So I'm using Shimano Dakotas. I've got the old style and I've got the new style. The new style is a lot faster. So I'm using those for my cranks or things where I, want to be able to pick up line or can get away with that. And, I'm using the older ones for spinners and things like that, where people generally reel too fast, and I'm always trying to get them to slow down. And in both cases of the Shimano Dakota, I'm using that 500 size. And it's really, to me, it's kind of an important thing. And I know everybody's always looking for smaller. But having that 500, you're going to get, it's still a small reel. It's super compact. I mean, it's like, back in the day, we were using bait casters for bass that were bigger than that. But you're going to have larger drag washers, and the line's just going to work, even though I'm not worried about capacity whatsoever. those drag washers are going to be a little bit bigger. You're going to have a little bit better gearing as far as for what we're doing. We're going to have, when you look at the drag stuff and the specs, we're going to get a little bit more drag out. And I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but like some of them are, let's say on the really, really small reels are like 12 pound, and we're upwards of like 16 or 20 when you get those a little bit bigger size reels. So for me, the 500 size is kind of important, even though I don't need the line capacity. And it's also going to stack that line on there a little bit nicer too, and not have on some of those narrower spools that some of the smaller ones have. So that's something that I would keep in mind. And, you know, when you do spool those up, you know, do it right the first time, but then you only put 300-400 feet or something on once you re-spool after. That's kind of a key deal. Make sure you do it right the first time though.
Yeah, we're getting a bunch of questions on that right now, Ross. Here's one from Ryan Clark again. Ryan wants to know if you re-spool your reels for every trolling season, so every year.
Re-spool
every season.
Re-spool and calibrate, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I started kind of teaching people about that calibrating thing probably close to 20 years ago when I figured that out kind of the hard way. And I re-spool or calibrate sometimes weekly. I mean, you got to remember, I'm fishing 7 days a week. Very shortly, I'm about a 120-day stint in a row. So, you know, when things happen, maybe some ding-dong clients, maybe some ding-dong captains too. But, you know, things happen. Sometimes a little small fish may kind of mess your stuff up, or you hit a log or sticks or whatever it can be, or just a lot of catching a fish. You know, I change my line accordingly. That's why I kind of have some backup stuff so I can work those in and I don't have to do them when I'm in a pinch. But yeah, I check the calibration, that stuff all the time, because you got to remember, as you keep cutting that off or you get a little nick or something in there, every one of those things is going to change things. And all of a sudden, if one's off a little bit this way and one's off this way, that's going to make a big difference on certain presentations.
All right, we got one from YouTube here. Jeremy, once again, he wants to know, how are you using your Fishhawk data when you're trolling for walleyes on Lake Erie?
I want to know what my speed is. I want to reproduce that. And, you know, sometimes I think people get caught up with that number too much as far as what that number is. Agreed. I'm using that basically as a control. So I know like Lance and a couple of those guys in the questions were like, hey, you're going up, you're going down. I'm just using that as a control number. So some guys, you know, I have buddies in the springtime, they're like, oh my God, we're going 1.4. The water's too cold for that. I don't really care about the number. I just want to be able to duplicate that. So maybe my fish move, maybe the water clarity changes and it causes me, I got to shift a mile or two, or I just keep going on that pass. I want to make sure that as I set up again, or things change, or maybe now I need to go a little faster or slower, what was that real number that I was at? And then again, if it's flat calm, I tell people all the time to use the Fishhawk, most important time is probably when it's flat calm, because you don't realize the current that's going on there, and it's very difficult to read it. When we have a little bit of wave action, you know, and either the waves determine how your boat's going to go and what we have to deal with, or it makes it a lot easier to read the current. But when it's flat calm, that 100% is the time that you better have that Fishhawk out if you're not catching fish, especially if you're, you know, going in multiple directions. So, but ultimately, I use that number as a reference point. But again, as Captain Dan set up on there, you have to remember, I've been doing this 200 days a year for more than 20 or 20 plus years. And so experience really helps me a lot. Sometimes I could do this with my eyes closed a little bit because I kind of know what to experience from how the conditions have been. But until you get some time on your hands with that, play with the Fishhawk. It really, really makes a big difference.
All right, we got one from Captain Phil Rutherford, and he wants to know what models Dakotas will be available going forward. Is there anything that's going away or coming back there?
Well, the stuff that you see out is kind of what it is. I mean, the older, you know, kind of more silver round reels, you know, those obviously have been discontinued. Now we've got those a little bit more lower profile. I'm going to call them kind of a deep blue, and what you see out is what's going to be there for the foreseeable future. So I'm only privy to so much stuff and a few things that I definitely can't tell you, but I mean, I think that lineup is pretty diverse, and if anything, it's even a little bit bigger than what we had before.
I think I just saw a new 800. I think they either just released the new 800 or announced the new 800 here like this week. So
yeah, I wasn't sure if I was able to say that yet or not, but so
I saw it somewhere. So if I saw it, then it's not top secret.
So they've got them in counter and non-counter models. And again, you know, the original Dakota, I think those things were probably about a 15-year run or something. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we we
How
don't
much
see
weighted steel you could
changes
put on
go on.
800? It'd be a lot more than you'd want to reel in. I have a feeling. So
Do you know what I do when an 800 would go? I act like I got to go to the bathroom.
yeah,
Because
it's just like when you come on the
no
show, it's like, yeah, I gotta go to the bathroom. So
yeah, I mean that's why I brought that up.
Yeah,
There's
I
just no love here.
yeah.
Well,
No
Ross,
love.
we really appreciate you coming on. It was always fun to talk to you. Always fun to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on. If you want to learn more about Ross and what he's got going on, he's got a podcast. He's got an awesome YouTube channel. And you can find his website at bigwaterfishing.com. The winner of Ross's segment is going to be Ryan Clark over on Facebook. Ross, thanks again so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah,
Yep,
you too.
Thank you.
All right. Our next guest is ready to go, and he's another. It's like legend after legend these days.
This is going fast. I'm looking at the clock and I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, these 20-minute segments are kind of burning.
20 minutes goes fast when you're having fun, and we are talking now with Captain Russell Gahagan. Russell, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you guys doing?
Oh, good.
We're having a good time talking some fishing tonight, and it seems like people are really enjoying the show. If you have any questions for Captain Russell Gahagan, go ahead and put them in the comments over on YouTube and on Facebook, and we'll try to get to those. And once again, when we pick your question as the question of the segment, we're going to send you a Fishhawk kind of a bunch of swag, some stickers and stuff like that. Whatever we got kind of laying around to give you, we'll send it out to you. Russell, having you on tonight to talk salmon candy. What's new there with salmon candy?
Well, like it's been the last couple of years. It's been a crazy winter. We've been spending all winter working on building inventory, and I just it doesn't cease to amaze me. We're very blessed to have a pretty large group of customers, and the faster we make the inventory, the faster the inventory sells, which is a good problem to have, but also a struggle at times because I'd always like to please everybody, which is tough to do. But I'm going to spend a couple minutes as we just kind of highlight some of the products Salmon Candy sells and sort of some of the new stuff. So 8-inch flasher wise, we, our bread and butter at Salmon Candy, one of our, top selling items is our 8-inch flashers. I think we're up to 80 or 90 different colors at this point. We've got, I think 8 new 2022 colors. This is one of them, Songen's Green Bam. That's been real popular so far. They all have actually, but we do have 8 new colors in that 8-inch flasher lineup. Those have been selling like crazy. Something we brought in last year towards the beginning, basically right at the beginning of the season, had a very limited inventory of that went hog wild was we did 2 Dodgers. We have a double O Dodger that's real popular for coho fishing, obviously kind of the staple of the coho Dodger market. And then something that's new that's been out for a long time really, but just has caught on has been this Stubby Dodger. It's a Gold Star product that we customize and finish here at Salmon Candy. And I mean, we literally, these things last about 24 hours on the website. We put a batch on. I think we got six or 8 colors of them. We put a batch on, and we're lucky if we get through 24 hours with them. So that's a couple items there. Kind of keep rolling through some of the other stuff. We got 2 new fly colors this year in the Salmon Candy fly lineup. We've got the Glow Green Goblin, which is our green glow fly. It's the first glow fly we've done. Well, I guess we got the glowing lap, but this is the first with glow material in it, I should say. We've had a lot of customers that ask for something green and glow. It's real popular on the Michigan side, also real popular on Lake Ontario. And then kind of one that I've really fished and loved for a long time that I felt we had to do is Vanilla Ice. Had a lot of customers asking for something with Little Boy Blue in it, and I love Little Boy Blue mixed with UV, which is most of what this Vanilla Ice fly is. So that's something sort of new for 2022. Our cowbells went crazy last year. Everybody that fishes Lake Michigan, Lake Ontario, Lake Huron knows that, and Lake Superior for that matter, all 3 of those, or all 4 of those, have a pretty strong lake trout population. And, our cowbells just went berserko last year. This is one of our new colors, the Orange Stud UV, which has been real good, but we've got, I think, 6 colors in that. And those 2 have been tough to keep in stock. Cowbells are something that are really catching on. My YouTube videos, Russell's Fishing Tech on YouTube, has helped a lot of that, as I'm working real hard to educate anglers all throughout the Great Lakes and, try to help them catch more fish. We've got a pretty big variety of stuff nowadays. We've got mini spoons, which were a real big hit last year. brown trout fishermen, coho fishermen, steelhead fishermen, and we even saw the guys on Lake Erie. We were getting a lot of orders for guys ordering mini spoons. It's a perfect size for trolling for walleyes on Lake Erie. A standard size spoon, just kind of just your run-of-the-mill standard in a sense, size-wise anyways. This is a new color, Orange Night, which has been real popular, but this is a great steelhead, coho king spoon, and then our Magnum spoon, which was sort of the bread and butter for a lot of anglers late last summer trying to chase king salmon on Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan. This has been a great size for us and profile. We've got it in a lot of glow colors. We've got new glow colors. This is one of our new glow colors that's available. A couple of them here that's available on the standard and Magnum. Toasted Wonder, Fruity Pebbles, and then we've got some other ones too. For those of you at home maybe that don't know a lot about Salmon Candy, sort of the company is based on our flies, which is sort of a weird thing, I guess, or different thing that makes them different and very applicable to the Great Lakes. We have an interchangeable fly system. So basically you buy the flies separate from the leaders. You can either purchase leaders from us or tie your own leaders, and the fly slides on the leader. I've got multiple videos out with that. I showed that in this Great Lakes, fishing show last year. It works really good. The advantage of it is it makes storing your flies, storing your leaders a lot easier. They don't have to stay connected. And also you can quickly interchange fly bodies. If one day they want vanilla ice and that's your hot one, you can put 4, 5, 6 of those out. If the next time you're out, they seem to really want green and glow, you can quickly switch over to green and glow and switch a bunch of those out real quickly. So that really helps. We've got meat rigs. We've got lake trout rigs. We've got a pretty big variety now, swivels, hooks, all different kinds of stuff. But one of the things that really took hold last year, especially on Lake Ontario, was our fish blades. We've got 2 sizes of fish blades, the 12-inch, which I would say was the one that really took hold on Lake Ontario. That was, the double fin 12-inch fish blade. It's got sort of a unique kick. And what's nice about that particular fish blade, this one in the 10 inches, doesn't pull nearly as hard as a lot of the other fish blades on the market do. So it doesn't put as much stress on the rod and your equipment when you're fighting a nice fish. And then here on Lake Michigan, at least for me personally and for a lot of customers that I worked with, the 10-inch fish blade was real good here on Lake Michigan. We ran a fly behind it, 30 inches behind it, worked good with meat. Also worked good with a new product we came out with last year called a vegan rig, which is basically similar to a meat rig, but you replace the head and meat with a large fly. So you got 3 teaser flies all the way down to a standard size fly. We came out with that last year called a vegan rig, and that was a real popular item. So that sort of rounds up, the product itself. Like I said, we got tons of new stuff. I mean, I would need 2 hours to go over all the different stuff we got going on. As always, colors are a big thing, new products, everything.
The word must be out because questions are flying. So,
all right.
We got one from Facebook here. Timschlappy wants to know, he's headed, making a trip down to Sheboygan from northern Michigan. He wants to know, when is the best time to go and what would be your favorite lure at that time?
I would say mid-June is the go-to time for Sheboygan, especially if you want to chase king salmon. That's kind of our staple period, that mid to end of June period. And it's going to be flashers and flies, primarily chrome flashers, ones like Blue Stud, Green Jeans, Megatron, Kryptonite. Any of those staple chrome flashers are going to be go-tos for you for sure.
Here's one. You talked about your cowbells a little while ago. Just purchased one of your large Salmon Candy cowbells. What size flasher do you suggest to run with it, and what size leader do you run? I think the leader, just from personal experience, that when you're running, with the cowbells, that's kind of an interesting one, I think.
Yeah, so you don't need a flasher with it. That's one of the advantages. The cowbell kind of acts as the attractor. So you would run just these cowbells by itself, and then a leader behind it to a spin and glow. Here at Salmon Candy, our spin and glow rigs have a small fly skirt behind them, a little coho fly skirt. I like that. I think it adds a little bit of color, gives a little bit more profile to it. But you can use just a plain spin and glow or a spin and glow with a fly skirt behind it. Anywhere between 24 and 30 inches seems to be the go-to. I personally like 24, but I think you can go up to 30 and then it'll work anywhere really in between there. The real advantage to cowbells is that you can fish them at a very large variety of speeds. So when we used to fish Dodgers a lot for lake trout, not this particular size, but the bigger size 0 lure Jensen Dodgers, I was a big proponent of those. I had a lot of tournament success fishing lake trout with those. The downside to them was you had to fish them at like 1.5 to 1.8 miles an hour. The advantage to the cowbell is you can fish that at 2 to 2.5, mix it in with all your salmon gear, put that cowbell on one downrigger, put it way down deep near the bottom, and you can catch 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lake trout in a day. Add to your catch of other silver fish and have yourself a really fantastic day.
Very cool. Here's one from Facebook. It's Rob Ferguson. He'd like to know, what's your go-to setup for lake trout in the spring?
Spring, if we're talking like May 1st or previous, I would say probably would be mini spoons, or maybe even a standard spoon in real shallow, like 10 to 20 foot of water. And in particularly probably would be gold and yellow spoons. A gold blank, like this Lance's Two-Face is a gold, gold body instead of a silver or a copper body, but something with yellow on it. So yellow jeans, in particular, something like that. Mountain Dew Stud would probably be one of my favorites. That's sort of a go-to. Now, if we're talking spring as in like May 1st to the end of May, cowbells for sure. Absolutely, no doubt.
More cowbell.
More cowbell.
Yeah, more cowbells.
All right. Let's take a look here. Let's see. What do you like here, Trevor?
Let's see here.
I like this one. This one's from Steve V. He says, your dad runs one side of the boat, you run the other. Who catches more fish?
I like that. Steve, you're the winner. I can tell you that right now.
Well, I would say my dad is known around here as the GOAT, so it'd be probably hard to outmatch him. But I think if you asked him, he'd probably tell you me. If you asked me, I'd tell you him. Obviously, it's a day-by-day thing. What I say about my dad is the truth. I think he's probably the greatest Lake Michigan fisherman of all time. He's been doing it for 42 years. I would make the argument he's got more trips than anybody else out there. My forte has kind of been tournament fishing. That's not really his forte. His forte is definitely charter fishing, so it's a little bit different. But both of us have obviously had a great career and hope to both continue it for a while. He's 63 years old. He said he thinks he's got another 3-4 years left in him, and I hope he does.
All right, Larry Daisha is a regular on the show, and he wants to know, what's your number one go-to flasher fly combo and spoon?
Well, that's a tough one as always. Time of year is going to play a role in that. I talk a lot about loving chrome flashers in June and early July, whites and greens in later July and August. But I guess if you told me I could only run one flasher for the rest of my life, it would be really, really hard to beat Megatron. It's our number one seller, and it's our number one seller for a reason. It's a great king flasher. It's a great steelhead flasher. It works really, really well. That's the chrome Megatron, of course. Spoon-wise, last year for me at least, and I really got hung up on it, it'd be really hard to beat Green Jeans UV. And I prefer the non-glow one, actually. A little more silver to it, just because I think it's a little bit more balanced. We also make a super glow Green Jeans UV, which works great as well. But this one here, I think, just works so well for such a mixed bag of fish. Catch kings, catch lake trout, catch steelhead, early season cohos in the smaller sizes. It's hard to beat that color. That's just a proven pattern, and it's been really good for me over the years.
All right, here's another one from YouTube. I like this one. It's from Johnny Quest. He wants to know what you think is the biggest difference in presentation for king salmon from the Wisconsin side to the Michigan side. Any differences there in how you set up, and what are they?
Yeah, I mean, it's a total different ball game. The main thing is just depth of water, right? So we fish probably 3/4 of the year in the top 60 foot of the water column. They fish 3/4 of the year 60 foot or below when they're chasing king salmon. So, we use a lot of, planer boards, for example. We don't have a ton of success on riggers. Wire dipsies can have their days, but I mean, pump handles, 200 weighted steels or coppers, 5-color lead cores, 7-color lead cores, 10-color lead cores, all that stuff's going to get you really in the range on the Wisconsin side for all of May, June, and part of July. On the other side, you're going to need to get down 60 to 120 feet to get to those fish after about mid-June. So, you need either really heavy coppers, wire divers, or riggers. And so it's just the other real big difference is we use a lot of 8-inch flashers. Of course they do too, but they use a lot more bigger stuff. The bigger stuff is much more popular in Wisconsin, or in the Michigan side, excuse me, because they're fishing much deeper than we are. Us fishing up higher, we get away with a lot more 8-inch flashers. So before we jump to the next question, I did forget to mention one thing. Probably one of the hottest selling things in the last 2 years at Salmon Candy has been our storage boxes. Our storage boxes have been just on fire. We've got a lot of models now. This particular one's a Doctor tender. It holds the Spin Doctors, which are real popular on the Michigan side. I mean, we've got a flasher tender. We got an XL one for the big ones. We've got one that holds fish blades. We've now got a spoon, a standard spoon, a Magnum spoon. We got one that holds the Dodgers. We call a coho tender. We're working on a Dipsy one. We've got a fly box. I'm sure at some point we'll have a cowbell one. So, I mean, we really have a large array of really good storage options for all anglers out there that are looking to store their Great Lakes gear. And we're trying to do it in a manner where it's compact and as small as we can possibly make them, so you can get a bunch of stuff in your boat.
I think I understand that. I remember last fall I put away like this giant tote. Probably most of them came from you, Russell, but I mean, like, it's like flat. I mean, it's a disaster. I mean, I probably get that. So
leads us to Chris Morris's question. He wants to know if there's a Salmon Candy addiction helpline.
Absolutely. Tell him he can call my cell phone anytime, and I'll walk him through how to order a few more and make him feel better.
All right. Here's one from Ryan over on YouTube. He says, for fishing Spring Kings, it seems to him that spoons are most common. You mix in a few flashers here and there, you just run all spoons.
So a lot of it depends on what you consider spring, right? So for here in Sheboygan, we don't really see kings till about mid-June. So by the time they get here, it's pretty much a heavy flasher bite. Now, when I go down south and chase them, Port, Milwaukee, Kenosha, Racine, maybe even all the way down to, I fished a Michigan City tournament. I fished out of Portage, Indiana. That's going to be pretty heavily spoons. It seems like that March and April timeframe, if you're going to chase kings, it's going to be primarily spoons. You get into that mid-May to late May, and it starts to turn more flashers and flies, maybe a 50-50 mix. And then once you get into June, at least for me here out of Sheboygan and a lot of the charter guys and stuff, it's going to become pretty heavy flasher flies.
All right, Russell, here's a good one. I think you'll enjoy this one. This one's from Stephen Connolly on Facebook. He wants to know if you have any recommendations for someone looking to get started in tournament fishing for salmon and trout.
Yeah, I mean, I think that depending on where you're located, the tournament trail, obviously, that has all Michigan events now, is definitely a good option. But really what I think a lot of folks should do is just try to fish some of their local derbies and tournaments to kind of get started. And that's a good, derbies have some luck involved, or a lot more luck. There's luck involved in all of it, but there's a lot more luck involved in derbies than actual time tournaments. But it is a great, more inexpensive way to sort of get your feet wet, especially if you're going to, maybe get your kids involved or your brother or something, and make it sort of a family deal. And then once you get a little bit better at it and you want to get a little more competitive, then you can kind of step it up to some of maybe those higher end tournaments, like, the one that's run out of Ludington. They get 120 boats every year, and that's a pretty big deal over there, and it's a lot of fun.
All right. We got one here. Looks like I like this one from Mike Howard. He wants to know, what's the primary consideration for choosing fly color in the top 60 feet of water in the spring?
So for me personally, here on the Wisconsin side especially, but I also found this on the Michigan side, blue flies, aqua, powder blue, things like that, and something like this, vanilla ice, real shiny, stuff like that. More natural colors work really well for me early in the year. I've always been a proponent, and I promote this heavily, that adult king salmon, you try to catch them on feeding stuff, natural looking stuff early in the year. Once you get in that late July, August timeframe, then stuff like this, is more what they're looking for. Something that's more of an aggressive pattern, what I call gaudy. My dad calls it khaki. In a fly color, I would absolutely switch later in the year to like this glow green goblin. That's a later in the year fly to me. Green flies tend to work when the water warms up. Later in the year, something glow is gaudy for sure, something I would run later in the season. So early in the season, more blues, more shiny. Late in the season, glows, greens, more gaudy colored.
Awesome. Russell, really appreciate you coming on the show. If you want to find out more from Russell, you can go to his YouTube channel, which is awesome. It's Russell's Fishing Tech. And then you can also find more about salmon candy at salmoncandyfishing.com. Russell Gahagan, always a pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate your time tonight.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, guys. I appreciate for you guys putting this on.
All right. Russell, once again, delivering the goods. Lots of good information there for people.
Can't believe we're an hour in.
We are an hour in, and we've got a new guy coming on now. And again, another guy that we like to have on the show as much as we can. It is Mr. Jake Romanak. Jake, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good, boys. How are you? I dressed up for you tonight.
I was gonna say, it looks like are you coming off the ice? You're going on the ice? What's the story?
Literally coming off. Like I was racing to make it, but we made it.
Well, we're glad that you did.
Looks like you made it. You've been a busy guy. I know I had some communication with you guys over the weekend. You were doing a sports show. Tell us about that.
We were just at the Outdoor Rama Sports Show down in Novi, Michigan. And then I was trying to sneak in a television show. I'm actually here on Saginaw Bay right now. And the boys from Linwood Beach Marina were kind enough to let me jump in their office to do this here tonight. And then right after that, we have the Grand Rapids Sports Show that's coming up. And so, that's kind of the last sports show of the year. The Grand Rapids show is one of my favorites because it's, it's about heavy trout and salmon, a little bit of walleye. But you know how much I love trout and salmon, so I love doing that. We're doing seminars there. My dad and I are doing a walleye seminar on Saturday. I'm doing salmon seminars every single day of the show, and my dad's doing walleye seminars every single day of the show. So it's been busy, but busy's good. I'd rather be busy than sitting on my butt.
What are you guys seeing for show turnouts and stuff? I mean, we're kind of doing this virtual thing we got pushed into it a couple of years ago, kind of, but I think everybody kind of likes to go out and talk to people for real. I mean, the attendance is good. Everybody's happy and ready to go.
I think so. I mean, it's a stepping stone thing. After COVID, obviously, you got to start somewhere. And I would be lying if I said sports shows are what they were in 2020 and 2019. But there seems to be a lot of people coming out, a lot of enthusiasm. One of the things that gets me really excited is just how many people are getting into fishing right now. It's mind-blowing. I mean, so many people are starting fishing fresh. They're looking for fresh information to get out and be successful. And it gets me excited because that's what I do for a living, is teach people how to fish. So when there's new people coming to the game, I guess I got a little job security here.
Absolutely. We know how you feel. So
yeah.
We're going to have you on tonight to talk about Lowrance Live. And I think it's something that you're really excited about, some new technology. Just kind of give us an overview. What do you got going on there?
I am, yeah. So I got a unit right here. I don't know how well. Let me see if I can move it like that so everyone can see it a little bit better. This is my ice fishing unit. Perfect. I literally took it off the back of my snowmobile about 5 minutes ago. And this is what I was using today out on Saginaw Bay. And so the cool thing about this live sonar is that it's not only just an open water application, there's also ice fishing applications for it. It's relatively new. There's been some other manufacturers that have had live sonar for quite some time. Lowrance has had it out here for about 2 years and have been really excited to use it. For an ice fishing application, it's been incredible. Some of the things that it does for you is with a conventional sonar, what we've always been used to, like the 2D sonar, you're basically looking at primarily a 20-degree cone angle. And what that means is if you're in shallow water, you don't see very much of bottom. And if you're in deep water, you see a little bit more of bottom. In the application of live sonar, like this active target, the cone angle is actually 18 degrees by 135 degrees. And so what that means is you just see a lot of bottom. So I've actually been using it in down mode for ice fishing. And one of the really cool things is I can see fish that are swimming 20 feet, 25 feet away in flats, like I've been fishing on Saginaw Bay. Just being able to see that the fish are there. They might not be in the right mood to bite right now, but I know I'm in the right area because I'm marking fish. And I can't tell you how many times with the old conventional sonar, I just didn't think there was any fish there. We weren't marking any, but they were in such a negative mood that those fish could see our lure out to the side, and they were just not going to have it. They weren't even going to come and look at it. And as a fisherman, if you don't know they're there, you leave the spot. And so many times, if you wait those fish out on places like Saginaw Bay, as long as you know they're there, capitalize on that bite window, you can be really successful. And you might sit literally half the day just marking fish but not getting them to bite, and then they decide to eat, and you get even in a hurry.
All right, we forgot to announce in the last segment, Steve V from YouTube, you got the question of the night or question of the segment. Go ahead and message us on Facebook with your address. We'll get that out to you. If you guys have questions for Jake Romanek, go ahead and put them in the comments. Jake, you talked about using the live sonar in an ice fishing application. I think at this point, that application for this stuff has really been well documented. You see it all the time on YouTube. But I think in a trolling situation and even in open water,
right, the bit. I was like,
yeah, you don't, you just haven't seen or heard. You just don't have the content online about it. So how do you use that in a trolling situation?
Well, there'll be more and more applications, especially for trolling. Rod and hand style fishing is, I would say, where this live sonar really shines. So not just ice fishing. Obviously, I'm talking ice because I was just standing on the ice. But there's a lot of applications for it, rod and hand fishing. In trolling, there's a couple applications that I've been using that have been pretty cool. One of them is with salmon fishing. I've actually put it on a pole style system. Now, not this particular pole. This is my ice fishing pole, but basically a pole style system that goes over the side of the boat. And, this is a fin gear pole here. They make one for a boat. It's the same type of application. And I can put that in the water next to my downrigger. And the cool thing is I can literally point it in a forward mode and see my downrigger, and I can see whatever I'm fishing behind that downrigger. So let's say, for instance, I'm fishing a spoon 30 feet behind the downrigger. I can point that live sonar down to the downrigger. So now it's facing that. I can see the downrigger itself. I can see the spoon, and I can literally watch fish come up to the spoon. And what's been really cool is, like, literally I'm seeing these fish come up and look at the spoon and not eat it. Then they leave. Then they come back up and they look at it, and then they don't eat it. And it tells me that it's time to switch out that color, maybe switch out the size, change something. It's making me work my gear more because I can see that there's actually fish interacting with these lures in a trolling environment. And before, you might get a little lazy when you troll. You might leave that spoon on that downrigger for an hour and a half. But when I'm seeing fish come up on the graph and investigate that spoon at the back of the rigger, it's telling me, hey, fish are looking at it, but they're not eating it. Something needs to get changed. Another application for the trolling is actually having it on your electric motor or the front of your boat. Same thing, you could have it on a pole style system, or you can mount it on the electric motor, but have it facing forward. Now, in that situation for walleye fishermen, you're actually marking fish in front of the boat before you ever actually go over those fish. Now, I know what some of these tournament guys have been doing here in recent years is they're actually just scanning back and forth with their electric motor, trying to find a pot of fish that's in front of them. They might 40 feet in front of them, mark a pot of fish, and turn the boat in that direction and go right over top of that school of fish. So in my opinion, with this live sonar, it's only going to get better. And as us for anglers, we're learning different things constantly. That's really the cool thing, is that this is still relatively new. And guys that get an opportunity to play with it like this, we're coming up with more and more things down the road to use this sonar for. I think it's literally going to change the way that most people fish. When you look at sonar technology, we've come a long ways in not a long period of time, from paper graphs to all of a sudden live sonar, where I can scan fish out in front of the boat, see it, drive the boat to it, and catch those fish.
Yeah, I've talked to other captains who told me, they may have a setup out there, maybe a spoon out there that's drawing fish in, but it never gets a bite. But they see that as kind of an attractor. And he's like, well, maybe in normal times I would change that up. But he's like, every fish that would come in that day was coming to that spoon and biting somewhere else. But he's like, even though that rod wasn't getting a bite, it was actually a big part of what he had going on. He's like, I would never have seen that without the live sonar. So I think that's another cool thing too. But this question here so far, question of the night, this one's from Rob Ferguson. And this guy, I think this is the way a lot of people feel. Hi, Jake. I'm in the market for a new Lowrance unit, but my wife has given me a strict budget. Give me something I can tell her to convince her that is a must-have, not a want.
I like this guy. He needs to win question of the night.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I feel like I need to come up with a good answer. You put me on the spot.
Yeah, the pressure's on.
I mean, the way I look at it is that if you want to be cool, you need to have live sonar. So if his wife wants him to be cool, that's it right there. He's got to be cool with the boys. So that's it right there.
I can tell already you've not been married long enough, Jake, to be able to. You've not been married long enough to be able to answer that question. I think, Rob, I'm gonna just chime in and say that this is gonna maximize that limited time on the water, right, where potentially you wouldn't have to be gone as long.
There you go. No,
You know,
that's
so I could be home sooner if I had this technology at my disposal.
That's a man that's been married for a while, right
That's
there.
right. Yeah, you'll learn.
all right. Here's another one from Facebook. It's Chris Engard. He'd like to know what's your favorite port to fish on Lake Ontario, and what time of year if you're going to go after salmon.
My favorite time of year, we'll start time of year first, in Lake Ontario is the month of May. There's nothing better than them springtime kings. They're concentrated, a lot of fish in a small area. And in particular, Lake Ontario out of Lewiston, New York is my favorite place to probably fish anywhere in the Great Lakes. We travel there a lot. We filmed a lot of television shows there. Lewiston is actually on the Niagara River itself, and we run down the Niagara River out into the lake and fish the Niagara Bar. And that's a piece of structure that in the springtime, there's a lot of bait. And if you know king salmon, if there's bait there, the king salmon are going to be there. And you talk about a fishery that, I said it, and I did a salmon seminar last week here at Outdoor Rama. I've literally lost count of the amount of 30 to 50 fish days that we've had in the month of May on Lake Ontario out of Lewiston, New York. And that's a pretty special thing to say. I mean, we've caught them shallow, we've caught them deep, we've caught them everywhere in between. And it seems to me like if you show up to Lake Ontario in May, stay in Lewiston, New York there, you're going to catch a pile of king salmon.
All right, that leads us to this question from Steve Morris. Steve Morris likes to go after Lakers in the Niagara Bar. He says, what do you recommend when jigging for Lakers on the Niagara Bar?
Jigging for the cool thing about lake trout is jigging for lake trout is the same literally everywhere you go. I've everywhere in the Great Lakes that you can jig for a lake trout. I've done it now. Love jigging for lake trout. It's one of my favorite things. And there's just a handful of lures that we tend to take everywhere. Swim baits are one of the number one. So depending on the depth of water that you're fishing these fish, in the spring they might be shallower, in the summer they might be deeper. But anywhere from a 1 to a 3 or 4 ounce jig head and a 6 to 8 inch paddle tail seems to work really, really well. Like a Z-Man Paddler Z on like a 2 ounce swim bait head is kind of my go-to for lake trout jigging. But there's a lot of other options, even like a big tube jig. You can get a 1 ounce weight and a bigger tube jig and use a tube. You can use blade baits. I've used a ton of blade baits for jigging for these lake trout. The cool thing about the Niagara Bar is it's really nice structure. If you've been to Lake Ontario, and obviously this gentleman has, it's great structure so it concentrates fish. And that's kind of the key to jig fishing is you need to be where the fish are concentrated. If they're spread out, it's more of a trolling presentation using like what Russell was talking about before the segment. That's where cowbells and dodgers and spinning glows are really the best presentation for lake trout fishing. But when you have lake trout on tight structure, it's hard to beat a jig and a paddle tail and stay right on top of those fish.
All right, let's go back to the Lowrance Live. Larry Daisha, guy that seems to always join us every time we go live. Really appreciate Larry watching all the time. How well does it work? How well, when he's talking about Lowrance Live, how well does it work when fishing a drop-off? Then kind of to go along with that, Steve Connolly wants to know, how deep are you able to see your downriggers with the live view?
That's a good question because it's a pretty intuitive question to this whole live sonar. And it's one of the things that I started off by saying that I feel like live sonar is only going to get better. I start this off by talking about how these are all updatable units. And so as they come out with updates, I think since Active Target's come out, there's been 3 or 4 big updates that have really changed it, and it's been better every time. However, when it comes to depth of water with live sonar, that is one thing that I feel like it might be lacking. I would say 60 feet max is about what Active Target is good for as of right now. The reason for that has everything to do with cone angle. When you see 135-degree cone angle, you're seeing so much of bottom that it ends up distorting the image when you start getting out into 100, 120 feet of water. When I was talking about using my downriggers, I've kept my downriggers above 60 feet. A lot of times I'm doing that at 40, 50 feet down or higher up if you want to fish higher up in the water column. But as far as jigging lake trout with it, I found some applications for it, especially when they come up a little bit shallower. But like I said, with that 135-degree cone, it's not quite there yet for the deep water lake trout jigging that we like to do. But I definitely see that it'll be the future. Being able to change the cone angle of the sonar and narrow it down for that deep water fishing.
All right, we've got one from another one from Facebook here. This is Scott Biscobing. He says, when you see salmon coming up to your baits on active scan but not hitting, do you change your color or size of lure to trigger a bite?
Yes. Yes, I do. You know, what you're talking about is, you know, maybe you leave that one on because you get an attractor that's bringing the fish into the spread, and maybe that works on that given day. But you know, my dad's up next. He'll be the first person to tell you that I'm never happy. I'm constantly changing color. I'm constantly changing size. To me, it's all about putting a pattern together. Active Target from Lowrance helps me put that pattern together because I can see these fish reacting to the lure. And it tells me, are they going to eat it or are they not going to eat it? And if I see 4 or 5 fish come up and look at it and not eat it, to me, there's a reason for that. And in that situation, I'm either changing the size of the lure, the color of the lure, maybe changing it from a spoon to a rotator and a meat rig or a rotator and a fly. I'm constantly changing stuff out because I feel like if these fish are seeing it and not eating it, there's obviously a reason for that. I've said it 1,000 times in all my seminars, but to me, the one goal for me every day that I set for myself when I go out on the water trolling is I want every rod in the boat to have at least got one bite, because that's telling me that all my gear is working. And that's what trolling's all about, is putting that pattern together. Say that I'm fishing with my wife or a couple friends and I have a 6 or 8 rod spread. I want to make sure that if I have an 8 rod spread out there, that I got a bite on all 8 rods. That means that they were all doing something at some point in the day to contribute to catching fish. And the way to do that is to work your gear. So often I hear, man, trolling's boring. And honestly, if you think trolling's boring, you're doing it wrong. I'm constantly trying to figure out that pattern and get it figured out where you never sit down. You're working your gear, you're changing out baits, you're cleaning baits, you're adding scent to baits. You might be, you know, completely switching your spread over or changing speeds, figuring out your speed at depth, figuring out temperature at depth. There's so many things that goes into trolling. It's one of the reasons I love it. It's just kind of like that puzzle piece you have to put together every day.
All right, here's one from Jim Lemon. Jim would like to know, is active sonar, is it able to mark fish at speed, or would he need to combine that with regular sonar as well? So is this type of system, is this a one does it all, or would he need to pair it with another system?
Well, in most applications, you're going to have that already on your boat. So you're already going to have your 2D sonar, your conventional sonar on your boat, which is a good tool for marking fish at speed, like suspended fish at speed. Maybe you're walleye fishing on Lake Erie. Active Target isn't a tool for that for the most part because we put it in after the fact. So let me give you, an idea of what this live sonar really is. When it comes to the transducer itself, that's the money maker, right? That's what marks the fish for us. It's not that beautiful screen, it's the transducer. And with a conventional transducer, something like the Lowrance 83200 transducer that's been around forever, or the HDI skimmer transducer that's relatively newer to the market, that transducer has crystals in it, but the crystals aren't moving. So what happens is something has to move, whether the boat is moving or fish have to move to create an image, to draw an image. If you sit perfectly still, it's going to be a solid line. It's the reason why if you use a conventional sonar like an 83200 transducer, if you use that ice fishing, why everything marks as a solid line is because nothing's really moving underneath to draw that image. Now with live sonar, it's completely different. There's crystals in it just like any other transducer, but those crystals are moving and they're drawing the picture. So where live sonar really shines is in an environment where you're either sitting still or moving slow like a trolling environment and have the fish that are moving, and that's drawing the picture. So you don't have to physically move to get that image, and that's kind of the advantage of this live sonar.
Jake, I know you guys do a ton of filming. You go out and do all these seminars. If somebody wants to know more about the Lowrance Active Sonar, what's the best place for them to go to check that out and learn more about how to use it, not only in a trolling application, but also just like rod and hand type application?
You know, the good old-fashioned YouTube is a great tool for that. There's a lot of really good stuff. Now, I'm probably in a situation where I'm supposed to tell you to go to fishing411.net and check it out there because that's my job and that's my television show. But honestly, if you go and you research stuff on YouTube, there are a ton of really good content out there of guys all over the country that are using this live sonar. And honestly, I've spent hours on YouTube researching it myself to figure out how I can maximize this technology in my own applications. But if you are looking for content, we've created a lot of good content. If you're looking to follow what we're doing, my dad and I have actually started a new newsletter. It's been going on for about a year now, but you can go to fishing411.net. You can click on the blog posting, and there's a spot where you can subscribe. It doesn't cost any money, but basically each week we send you an update of what the Fishing 411 crew is up to on that week. We give full-length television shows, tech tip videos, blog postings from my dad. We keep it relatively short, so you're not spending hours and hours and hours looking at it. But it's just something, a little tool that lets you know what we're up to in all of our travels and where we're going. And then maybe there's a tech tip there that you didn't know, and you can learn something from it.
All right, very good, Jake. I really appreciate coming on and spend some time with us. When we run these shows like this, sometimes you have technical difficulties, and it's difficult for us to go out and reach out to the people we got coming on next. We do have Mark Romanek in the green room right now, but Mark, right now your camera isn't on, but can you hear us and can you talk to us?
Yeah, I certainly can hear you. Imagine that I would have a technical problem.
See,
Because I'm not at home, boys. That's the problem.
I was just going to say, you realize what's going to happen here, Mark. You know who's going to blame who and who's going to take credit, right?
Well, luckily for me, the lovely Mary Romanek is here right now trying to solve this technical problem. If it was up to me, we'd just be talking, man. This would be a radio interview.
And that kind of works right now. I mean, we can kind of do it. So.
Yeah, that's the good thing about having your son on before you. So what we're going to do, Mark, is we're going to drop you back into the green room for right now, and
Okay.
we're going to talk to Jake for a few more minutes, and hopefully Mary can help you get going on there. Jake, you guys go out and film all over the place. Tell us a little bit about kind of what you guys have been up to and what people can see recently on Fishing 411 TV.
Fishing 411 TV right now, this week, we are airing a Lake Erie episode where we used, we used the guppy weights from Offshore Tackle and Yakima bait hammer time crawler harnesses, and we caught a pile of fish. And basically what we did is we used different size guppy weights and used all the same lead length. So what that did is, in instance, maybe we used like a 1/2 ounce, a 1.5 ounce, and a 2 ounce, or maybe it was a 2 ounce and a 3 ounce. But basically we changed the weights, kept the same lead length, so we were spreading our lures out in the water column. We showed you exactly how to do that, catch a pile of Lake Erie walleyes with crawler harnesses. That's airing this week on the Sportsman's Channel, the World Fishing Network, and Sportsman's Channel Canada. And each week we have new episodes, and then they repeat. Coming up here in a couple weeks, we're actually going to start releasing these episodes on YouTube, and then we're going to put them on My Outdoor TV. We're also going to put them on Wired to Fish. So they're going to be out there for people to see on demand as well here in the next few weeks. So that's pretty exciting. And then obviously, since all of this stuff is shot a year in advance, I'm looking at the future. I'm looking at next year already. And we have a lot of really good opportunities, a lot of good show options for moving forward. Hey, Dad, you look good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Next time we're just going to have Mary do it.
That's right.
Actually, that probably would be better, and I'll just whisper in her ear what to say. How's that sound?
You have the new school and the old school, so don't, it is what it is, right?
It don't get no better than that.
That's right.
All right, Jake, thanks for coming on the show, and I appreciate you filling in a few more minutes there while we get that technical difficulty straightened out. So appreciate you coming on. Rob Ferguson, you win the kit there from Jake's segment. Jake, enjoy Saginaw Bay, get back out there and do some fishing.
Sounds good, boys. Thanks for having me on. I always appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, Mark, we're good. We're ready to talk, and we're going to talk some board tactics. We wanted to talk a little bit about Offshore Tackle first and kind of what they've got going on and what you like there. Tell us a little bit about Offshore Tackle boards.
Well, of course, I don't think it comes as any surprise that Offshore is kind of the leader when it comes to inline planer board fishing. They've been around a long time. The OR12, which is what they call their side planer to their workhorse planer board, I think it's been on the market pretty close to 30 years now. It was myself, it was Gary Parsons, it was Keith Tobias, and it was Bruce DeShano collectively that came together to prototype this board and bring it to market. And once it hit the market, it expanded very, very quickly. And there's just, if you follow the walleye tournament trail, virtually everybody is fishing the offshore board, and there's a reason for it. It's an American-made product. It is bulletproof. It can be fished with a multitude of different releases. So you can fish it with virtually any line you want. You can use it to pull almost anything you're going to troll with. And as a result, the offshore board is now coast to coast, the board, the board that everybody else is compared to.
If you guys have any questions on board tactics from Mark, go ahead and drop those in the comments. We'll get them to Mark, and of course, pick the question of the segment. What do you have, Trevor, for Mark?
I mean, I would tend to agree. I again, in my tackle bomb that I went through last year, I had a tote of offshore boards where it's like, I really need to, you take releases off a board and you throw it in there, and you're switching releases out here and there. And actually, I think, and I can't, you could probably clarify this, Mark. Does offshore, do they distribute the Silverhorn? I think it's the Sam's release. Is that something they distribute now?
Yep.
Because I had switched out a bunch of boards and was playing with those on some of the braid lines, and pretty neat device.
What they did is that the Silverhorn release, the Sam's Pro release, is a really unique release in that it is functional with braided line. It's probably one of the best possible choices for braided line. And so we approached Silverhorn and worked out a marketing agreement through offshore so that we're marketing them and selling them actually even in our packaging and stuff. We actually even approached them with the idea of buying the release. We like it so much, but Silverhorn wants to hang on to the rights of the release, which is fine. They're willing to private label sell them to us, and we're selling them to dealers coast to coast now. So actually, it's the best of both worlds. But it's not a design that Offshore Tackle came up with. Silverhorn Tackle Company came up with this design, and actually have one here. I can hold it up here a little bit here so you can see what it looks like. And the beauty of it is it's a plunger style release, and it is designed specifically to handle braid. Doesn't work with mono. Can't use it with mono. Can't use it with fluorocarbon. But if you're that guy that wants to troll with braid, or if you're doing things like maybe using braid as a backer line for your lead cores, your coppers, your weighted steels, that's the release you're looking for. It is flawless. It works every time, and we're proud to put it in the product line.
Yeah, I think Russell exposed it. First exposed me to it, and that was the scenario was on a braided backer, underneath core or the weighted steel line. So.
All right. This is the most common question I think we ever get whenever we talk about planer boards. And this one's from Neil. He wants to know if you change anything on the board from the as delivered setup. And I'll bet you hear this a few times at the shows as well, Mark.
I do. This is a very, very common question. And there's all kinds of things that people talk about doing to planer boards. And in many cases, they don't necessarily make things better. The most common thing is people want to know that weight in the bottom of the board. Should I move it? Should I move it forward, or should I move it back? Will the board run better if I do this or if I do that? And honestly, for the average fisherman, 99 times out of 100, leave the board alone just the way it comes, and you're probably going to be better off. But there are some modifications you can consider that are going to do things a little bit differently for you. If you're pulling something on a planer board that's really heavy, maybe you got 10 colors of lead core, 15 colors of lead core, and the board is kind of standing up in the front, you can slide the weight at the bottom of the board a little bit further forward to counterbalance that and bring the nose back down a little bit. When the nose comes down, it bites the water a little bit better, and you get a little bit more playing ability. So it allows you to take that heavy lead core and get it out to the side a little further. But for most applications, honestly, I tell people to leave the board just the way it is when it comes out of the package, and you'll be more happy.
All right, here's one from Jeff on Facebook, and Jeff wants to know, when you're pulling multiple boards, how do you avoid getting those tangles?
And that's probably the most common question, and certainly right there close in the common questions. I think one of the reasons that people tangle lines is they don't understand the fundamentals of trolling. If you're stacking multiple board lines, if you've got 3 or 4 board lines, you really want to take your shortest lead, your highest in the water column lures, and put them to the outside. So your outside board, your furthest board away, is going to be your high line. Then the next board, say your middle board, is going to be a little deeper, and your inside board is going to be a little deeper yet. And if you do that, you'll stagger your lines nicely. But there's also tangles that associate from how you're positioning your rods in rod holders. That outside line we talked about, the high line, that has to be in the furthest forward rod holder. So if you've got tube style rod holders on your boat, that would be the one closest to the steering wheel on your boat. And then of course the middle line would be in the middle, and your inside line would be near the back. I also recommend, and this is something I've been doing for years, is rod holder trees solve a lot of line problems or line tangle problems with planer boards, because you're stacking your rods vertically and you can keep your rod tips spaced quite a ways apart, and the line is much further off the water than it would be with a tube holder. You almost never have an issue with one line crossing another. Some guys call it line jumping. That's virtually eliminated if you use trees to control your rods as opposed to tube holders or saddle holders. Those things right there, if you follow those recommendations, you'll have very few tangles with planer boards.
All right, how about releases? William Baker says pros and cons in using mono, braid, or Dacron with board releases. What are your preferences?
This is kind of interesting because if we were having this conversation a decade ago, I would say that 90% of the fishermen would have been running mono and there wouldn't be any question with it whatsoever. But these days, and I ask this question in seminars quite commonly. In fact, just at Outdoor Rama over the weekend, I asked this question, and it typically comes up that about 50% of fishermen are running braid as their main line. About 50% are running monofilament or fluorocarbon as their main line. So it's a kind of a toss up here, and everybody has their personal preferences. I'm still that mono guy. I like the controlled stretch in monofilament. But I would also go so far as to say that when I'm fishing mono, when I'm trolling, I rarely ever have a lead length longer than 100 feet. I really don't want long leads with mono because I know if I get longer leads, I'm going to need too much stretch. I'm probably not going to get a good hookup ratio. So if I have to get deeper, I'll either add weight to the line, something like a snap weight, or I will go to a braided line that's thinner in diameter to get me the depth that I'm looking for. So I almost never run a lead back further than 100 feet for that very purpose. So it becomes personal preference. And however you decide to go, if you go mono, there'll be certain releases you'll have to use. If you go braid, there'll be different releases that you'll have to use. But once you've accomplished those goals, you'll do just fine.
All right, here's one from Scott. He says, when fishing salmon, do you want you set your boards to release or stay engaged, and why?
Well, I release my boards, and I have been doing it for a long time. And there's a fair amount of misconception out there. People think that releasing a planer board, an inline planer board, creates slack in the line and causes you to lose fish. And I think this goes back to the early days of inline boards. The first inline boards that we produced had a release on the front. And then instead of having a release on the back of the board, they had a pigtail, just a little clip. And what we did is we put the pigtail over top of the line. We put the line inside the release on the front. So when a fish bit and we tripped the board actually was physically sliding down the line to the fish. And indeed, that was creating some slack in the line. And it created a situation where all of a sudden the board's all the way down by the fish and you're reeling the board and the fish in together at the end. I quit doing that many, many years ago because it just wasn't efficient. These days, we do it a little bit differently. And it's kind of awkward here with a planer board, but I can kind of give you the right idea. I've got a lure here that I toss in the water. That line is attached to the back of the board. And this is an OR16 clip here. And then the front of the board, it's attached here. And then the line would go back up here, would go back up to my rod. And if you look closely, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a loop of line here. And the beauty of this, we call it the loop trick. What happens when this board, when a fish bites and this board is pulling backward, when you take your rod out of the holder and you put some pressure on it, watch that loop as I pull. That loop is going to come out and it pops free from the front release. And now the planer board is just kind of dangling on the line by the back release. This is fundamentally very important. And the reason it's important is because you tripped your board. It's no longer planing, but it's still pegged on the line at exactly the same location. When you come tight on your rod and that line pops from the front release, you're actually coming tight on the fish in the same instant. Zero slack. Virtually never lose fish doing this. And the beauty of this is that if you stack 2, 3, 4 lines aside, you can trip a board and fight that fish without having to clear any inside lines. And I get into this all the time with my friends in Ohio, because in Ohio, guys all run the snapper releases and they have to clear boards in order to, to reel in fish from outside lines. And I'm like, guys, why are you doing this? You don't have to. The loop trick is flawless. It works every single time. And if you don't want to use mono, you can use the Sam's Pro release and do exactly the same thing with braid.
Here's a good one, and I think this kind of echoes what we're hearing from a lot of new anglers to the Great Lakes in seminars. And this is from Chris Enghart over on Facebook, and it says, "Do you use a particular rod and reel setup for your boards?"
I do. for many years now, I've been using telescoping rods. And the reason for it is that we fish out of relatively small boats. We're in 20-foot platforms. And so the traditional 8.5 or 9-foot two-piece planer board rod is awkward in a boat like that. There's no place to put it. It won't fit in the rod lockers. It just gets in the way. They end up laying on the floor. And of course, somebody stumbles on one and you end up with broken rods. So we've gone to telescoping rods, and we've gone to shorter rods over the years. We used to use 8.5-foot rods. Now we're all the way down to 7.5-foot rods. And when it's telescoped down, it's under 6 foot. So it slides in and out of the rod locker smoothly, easily. There's never any issue there. 7.5-foot rod, medium action, 10-pound test, something around 13 to 14 thousandths in diameter line is virtually the perfect setup for walleye. If I'm going for a larger species like trout and salmon, I might bump that up to 16 or 20-pound test line. But still, that rod is still capable of handling that. The other nice thing about these shorter rods is that they move around the boat very nicely. They're easy to put, wherever they need to be without any kind of cumbersome, problems there. And I've just find that there's nothing that beats a telescoping rod these days.
All right, you talk a little bit about avoiding tangles, when you're just kind of running your setup, but how about making those turns? What's a tip that you could give people as far as trying to keep those lines from really getting kind of messed up when you're making those turns?
Well, there's no doubt that turning the boat is where you're most likely going to have a problem with tangles. And I think the issue is that most of us, the reason we're turning the boat in the first place is that we just hit some fish. All right. So we just caught a couple fish. Maybe we had a double on or something. We're all excited. We want to get back to that waypoint as soon as possible. And as a result of that, we start making our turns, but we're too tight. You got to think about when you're using planer boards, you got to think about making very, very wide turns, like driving a semi truck. All right. If you're going to drive a semi truck, you got to take the turns extra wide. And it's the same when you've got all those boards out there. If you're noticing while you're turning that your boards on the inside are going slack, you're turning too tightly. So you need to go more gradually. Now, if you're in a big hurry and you're impatient, you can speed up while you turn. There's no reason why you can't speed up to make the process go a little faster. But you still have to go wide. If you try to cut it too tight, every time you're going to end up with tangled lines, and you're going to spend more of your time untangling your tackle than you are catching fish.
All right, here's one from YouTube. Bob Cox, he says, when you're adding cannonball weights, how much depth do you get per ounce of weight? He says he's hearing a lot of different answers from a lot of different people.
That's a good question. I honestly don't know how to respond to that other than to say that for years I just ran a 10-pound downrigger ball, and I made it work for everything. These days, I'm actually running 20-pound downrigger balls. And the reason for it is I want less cable sway. I want less blowback. I want to make sure that, my technology, my Fishhawk is functioning in the ability to give me the most accurate data possible. And the more blowback you have, the more fudge factor you have there. So 20-pound weights, there's almost no blowback whatsoever. And so they function very, very nicely. We do a lot of stuff like bottom track, where we're trying to keep our downrigger balls with very close to the bottom and following the contour using our Cannon downriggers. And as a result of that, those heavy downrigger balls are very important for that as well. So you could compromise and go somewhere in between. But the biggest problem with going with a large downrigger ball is that most riggers can't handle them. It's just that simple. A lot of riggers just don't have strong enough motors to raise a 20-pound downrigger ball. The Canon Optima TS, or TSs, I guess, is the ones that we've been using in recent years. They're fabulous. They bring that 20-pound downrigger ball up so fast it'll blow your mind.
Yeah, it doesn't even phase up. I think Bob's question, actually, Mark, kind of reading between the lines on it, was maybe more addressed to snap weights as far as, maybe your 50-50 rule, I think, is maybe where he was coming from.
Well, completely different thing. Snap weight,
obviously. Yep.
The interesting thing about snap weights is that people have been using weight on fishing line to get crankbaits deeper or other lures deeper for a long time. But through Precision Trolling, I believe we're the only ones who have ever combined a 2-ounce snap weight with a fixed lead, a 50-foot lead, and a specific lure, and then also specific speeds, and then all the lead lengths that you would use in combination with that. So essentially what it does is it creates a very, very accurate piece of information. So anything else that you would use, a 1-ounce weight, a 1.5, a 3-ounce weight, anything else is guesstimating at this point in time, because nobody's ever tested any of that to know what it would or what it wouldn't do. There's no rule of thumb. You can't say by adding an extra 1/2 ounce, you're going to pick up another 2 feet or 5 feet, because it's all speed relevant. that reminds me of like leg core manufacturers. Leg core manufacturers are famous for saying their leg core goes 6 feet per color. No, it doesn't. It goes 6 feet per color at a certain speed, but as you vary your speed, that lead core is going to rise or sink in the water column. It's the same with snap weights. And so ultimately, the only way to have this information is through the Precision Trolling app, and the 50+2 method is now available in about 75 or 80 different crankbaits, which we picked popular walleye ones, and there's some salmon lures in there as well, like maglip, which we use commonly to catch Chinook salmon.
Mark, I really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us tonight, talking some planer board tactics and just talking a little offshore tackle with everybody. Obviously, we've been putting it up there. People want to know more about you. They can go to fishing411.net. And you talked a little bit about a few other things. Any other shout outs you want to do before we let you go?
No, I just thought I was watching Jake's presentation before mine, and I tell you what, the kid makes me proud. He's doing a great job. And man, if I'd have known as much about fishing at his age, when I was his age, boy, I'd like to turn the clock back about 30 years.
I think he's got a bit of a competitive advantage, maybe growing up. So I think you did something right on your end to get the result that you're so proud of today. So
cool.
Well, we appreciate it, Mark. Have a great night. Thanks for coming on the show this evening.
Thanks for having me.
All right, other guests are in the green room. I love it when you can look down in the green room.
Other than our first technical glitch, this is I'm not even gonna say it.
It's going well. Everybody is showing up on time. And speaking of showing up on time, it's our guy Craig Sleeman. Craig, how's it going tonight?
Hey guys, how's it going? That's a tough act to follow. A couple of Romanak boys, so hopefully we can do you a little justice. Actually, going to introduce my good friend Mike Urema from Island Baits here as well. He just stopped in to drop some Douglas rods off, so we're super excited to be here.
Sweet.
Yeah, talking. We've been really talking trolling tonight, but you had a little bit different topic, and that was jigging on the Great Lakes. And hey, we're the Great Lakes show, and we like to sell stuff to people who troll, but and we know there's a lot of other ways to go.
I was actually kind of excited when I saw you were doing Douglas, Craig, because I'm kind of a closet fly fisherman, and that's what I know the brand from, and so yeah, I guess with that you can take her from there.
Yeah, fire away.
Thanks, guys. No, appreciate it. Yeah, so we chose Douglas in the last 2 years. Actually, they've been sponsoring our NWT campaign, and the reason we chose Douglas, number one, they're local. They're actually over here in Phoenix, New York, which is just around the corner in Mike's hometown over by Oneida Lake. And we've been doing a lot more jigging in the Great Lakes. And after last year's experience with Green Bay and even now Lake Erie, starting to find some ways, and we're not going to tell all our secrets, but obviously we're looking forward to Rod in Hand, and the technology that they're bringing to the table is just unbelievable. Starting off with a basic rod, and we talked to a lot of our guys, that ask questions about, what type of rod should I start with? And basically the rod that you can afford. And they have a very affordable series. It's called the LRS. And it comes in this really cool looking blue, a little bit of sparkle in it. We all know we love fishing on a sparkle boat. So of course we got a little sparkle in our rods, but the LRS is a super soft, blank. It's got great Fuji eyes. It's got a lot of really good qualities. And, starting off, if you're going to be throwing a, rip and glide or something of that glide bait technology, it's always nice to start off with a nice soft, more, lenient rod with that. Mike, talking about, throwing that, especially this year at Green Bay, having some success there with that. Now that you're co-angling on the tour, what do you like about the LRS versus the X Matrix?
It's exactly that. It's more affordable, where you can actually fill your boat full of them and have something that'll cover every aspect of what you're going to do rod and hand fishing wise. High quality. They are very sensitive, very lightweight, and like I said, the price point is absolutely perfect for what they're going to be.
Right, exactly. And then it's step up. Its big brother is the actual X Matrix series, and this comes again in many different sizes and different weights, and it's got some different blank sizes. The specific one that I actually have been throwing quite a bit with our blade bait from Mike's company, Island Baits, is actually an X Matrix 610. It's an extra fast tip. It's super sensitive. And what I like about it, when this blade bait actually starts to do its action down on the bottom as we're lifting it, off the sand or off the rock, I can feel every single bit of that motion. And that's what I love about it, is the fact that it is so sensitive that as soon as a fish either picks it up, stops it, and I know a lot of guys that fish blade baits in the Great Lakes and also, in our local, Finger Lakes area that where I'm from, is as soon as that fish stops that blade bait or pins it to the bottom, we've got to know about it, whether it's on the end of your cast, whether it's underneath the boat. This rod has actually been super helpful in detecting a lot of those bites. So yeah, super excited again this year, guys, to represent Douglas on tour. I know, thinking back to a lot of the tournaments that are being won now, obviously we're using, our trolling tactics in our big lakes, but starting to find some niches, around the corner that are definitely helping our game.
Yeah, the casting, even on big water, casting is, it's played a huge role in the walleye scene here the last few years. So it's you don't want to be the one trick pony, as they say. So
yeah, that's a fact.
Guys, Chris Engart won the question of the segment for Marks. So if you guys have questions for Craig, go ahead and put them in the comments. Starting to get a few, but Chris, go ahead and send us a message with your address so we can get that package out to you. But let's go to a question here. This one is from Jeff, and this is kind of a good kind of all-around question. What's an overall good setup for jigging on Lake Erie, rod, line, type, and jig? If you're going to go out there with one rod, one setup, what are you going out there with, Craig?
Perfect. And I think because Lake Erie does have a number of different species that we do catch while we're targeting our walleyes, it's always nice to have something with a little bit of backbone in it, something that's going to have a little bit more, castability, if you will, as far as length and distance that you're trying to cast. And anything in that 7-foot range, I think, has been very, very helpful. It's kind of a generic middle of the road. Obviously we like to fish a 7.2 for certain applications. And then I like to bump it down to my 6.10, but going back to that 7-foot, LRS or that X matrix, I think can be super helpful. And again, it's got enough backbone, but also has, you're not giving up the sensitivity. We've landed lake trout on them. I've landed a lot of smallmouth bass, and we all know that Lake Erie is known for a lot of those big smallies. And I remember, a couple of us were out actually on New Year's Day this year, casting some blade baits up in the rocks, catching them on our 7-foot X matrix. So I would start somewhere in that 7-foot range. And then, as far as line, obviously everybody's looking at the super line. I brought with me some Suffolks. It's actually, I like the 832. It's super smooth, and anywhere from that, 12 to 20 pound range, depending on, what you're trying to, cast and what lure selection you have. I really like that high vis, whether it's in, white, yellow, or green, something that you can see and detect, especially when that water condition, is allowing you to see those bites, especially if we've got, tons of runoff coming off Cattaraugus Creek the last couple of years. I know that we even had some tournaments canceled because of the high waters there. So anything with a little bit of color to it, so we can see it, and then also again, a weight that's going to be applicable for the lure that you're throwing. Going back to our leaders, this is a really big thing for us too. A lot of guys have a lot of tough times in throwing a blade bait because the hook comes up and actually physically grabs their line when they are casting. And I think there's a couple ways that, Mike, you found that we can kind of get away from getting that, what we like to call bungle. So if you want to just show the guys, how that works or what you found with your blade bait.
Yeah, a lot of guys will complain about how a blade bait will seem to come up and flip over and turn and catch the leader. So one of the things we like to go with is we go with a stiffer fluorocarbon leader. Fluorocarbon for a couple reasons. Less stretch. It's down there in the rocks, zebra mussels, and against everything else. So it's very abrasion resistant. You can be partial to any kind of leader you like. If we're name dropping here, I brought the Drennan in for my steelhead side, and a lot of trilene 100% for what's in the boat. We start somewhere around 12-pound test, generally 12 and 15. Not that you need the strength, it's that you want that stiffness. I tend to tie my leader somewhere between 18 and 24 inches. I don't like pulling the leader through the eyelet, and these micro guides, they can damage them pretty good. I actually connect my fluorocarbon to my braid with an Alberto knot, and kind of the secret to that knot is I'll we'll bend over the fluorocarbon, and usually somewhere between 7, whatever you do up, you do 1 more back down. So if you do 7 up, you do 8 back down. I try and do somewhere between 10 and 15 up, and we'll say 1 more back down when you're covering that knot. And I'll trim that fluorocarbon as tight as possible, but I'll leave like a 1/4 inch tag on my braid, because that's softer, and that way it cannot possibly pull back through that knot. It also has a second indicator when you are bass fishing. If you're flipping, it'll act as almost like a strike indicator if you're using a 5-foot leader you know that your jig has gotten to the bottom. That's getting off on a sidetrack and how we learned this, but that's why it's important to have that little tag end so that Alberto knot can't come apart. But like I say, 18 to 20 inches is all you really need, even with the high vis. And I also think that in my mind, it's important to tie a very straight knot on the snap when you're connecting your fluorocarbon to the snap on top of that bait. A straight line will cause it to pull straight and fall when it flutters. I think braid is important because braid tends to float. So if you can imagine that the tension on the water holding that up will allow that bait to flutter back to the, I can't get on the camera here. Where am I? It'll flutter back to the bottom as opposed to helicopter if it were pulling it down, like with a full fluorocarbon sinking line that didn't have that tension on it, because that going to the surface allows it to flutter down and lay flat on the ground. By watching these fish in clear water, we can see that they do eat it off the bottom more often than they will chase it or catch it. So usually when you go to lift again, they'll have the bait in their mouth. It's the people that jig it erratically or pull it sometimes 3 to 4 feet tend to snag the fish as the fish comes over to look at it, as opposed to one that sucks it in off the bottom. The other time I really think a blade bait excels is if we've got a lot of bait fish around. When you throw into those schools of bait fish, the vibration will cause that bait fish to scatter. The only thing left in the middle is your blade bait. It's just fantastic in that application.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to that, obviously blade bait's a great, application, but I'm just going to show you a couple more. Obviously any sort of hair jig, love to fish those with a stinger. Up in the rocks, super shallow in the spring. Very, very successful last May, especially over on the Buffalo end of things. And another thing we love to throw is that paddle tail and that swim bait. So if you get a chance and you're looking forward to getting out this spring, have a few of these in your arsenal. I think you'll be very successful. We can talk further, and go on forever about where and what, but I do want to let you guys have some more questions. So go ahead.
All right. This one's from Tom Miranda. We met Tom over at the Walleye Education Weekend, I think about 3 years ago. Tom would like to know, can you explain your tactics for jigging for walleyes on the east end of Lake Erie in the spring? That's about as specific as it gets.
That's our Verizon guy over there, Tom Miranda. Thanks for joining in. Tom, there's 3 things that we've been looking for. And, first thing, obviously, is structure. These fish in the spring, they're relating to structure. And number 2, obviously, water temperature. The warmer, the better. Those big lazy walleyes, they're looking to get into the spa. They're not going to the deep end of the pool early on in the season. So we're looking at structure and also temp. The third thing that I've been looking for, and we can attest to this too, is water clarity. I like to fish a little bit greener water. When you get to Ohio, we've got a lot of mud there. And so the Eastern Basin, we don't get the mud unless Cattaraugus flows, unless 18 Mile goes out. Sometimes down in Barcelona, we'll get some runoff that turns that water to that dirtier color. But I like to fish that seam. I like to find that transition between the clear water and that muddy water where that nice emerald green looks. And I think a lot of our fish are relating to that. I can attest to that. I know there's having some success right now over in the Niagara River, the upper Niagara. I know Jake talked about lower Niagara in jigging for lake trout, but our upper Niagara is holding some walleyes right now. And we're getting some reports that, the water's been dirtied up. We've got a little bit of snow here in Western New York. And so with that melt off today, we had a 45 to 50 degree day. It turned that water a little bit more in that green color, and they started to find some more fish. So I think structure's number 1, trying to find the warmest water possible, number 2, and then number 3 would be water clarity.
All right. We got one from Facebook that Trevor's got here for you.
Yeah, Nick over on Facebook asks, Craig, I saw a video that you did a while back where you took a black marker and made the leader black. Do you do that for all your leaders?
So it is actually the transition of that high vis line to that fluorocarbon. So not going to actually marker up the fluorocarbon itself, but if I've got some high vis line and I feel that 18 to 20 inches really isn't enough, I like to take the end of it with that black Sharpie. Usually a chisel tip works best. And I'll actually add about a 3 to 4 foot darker area just to give ourselves a little bit, mental sanity when it comes to, clarity of the water. With this Eastern Basin, we do fish a lot cleaner water. And a lot of times, are the fish line shy? Are they not? Can't say that it always hurts, but can't say that it helps either. So on both ends, I like to have, as many tricks in our bag as we can. And yeah, I do like to add that Sharpie marker to that last 2 or 3 feet just to give ourselves a little bit more stealth approach, if you will.
Gotcha. Obviously, I'm gonna jump in on this one. So obviously, I'm a trolling guy. So no pressure here, one way or the other. But I think this is a good question, and that's do you feel like you catch larger fish casting versus trolling? And that's Josh over on Facebook.
Tread wisely here.
No, I'm not going to influence it. Answer honestly.
Well, we're going to find out here pretty quick, but I'll tell you what, obviously I can put my bait over a number of schooled fish a lot faster, a lot more efficient, especially when they're suspended. We've had a lot of success trolling worm harnesses, over on our end, and we're learning that crankbait bite. So, trolling wise, I think we're going to catch, obviously a ton more of the larger fish. However, if you can cast at specific fish, and this is where the Jake Romanek, Lowrance, active target comes in, or, some of these, these new forward facing sonars. And we just saw Eric McCoy win the national championship, out on Ottertail, by casting, a glide bait in a fish's face 10, 15, 20 times before he got it to bite. And so, I don't know about as far as numbers, but if you're targeting a specific fish and a specific piece of structure, casting can be very, 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 very stealthy and very deadly. I just, personally, with the amount of fish that we have in Lake Erie right now and in other spots, sometimes it's more efficient to troll to try to pick through and get as many bites as possible. So that question can kind of go both ways. I think it's population. I know Green Bay doesn't have the population that Lake Erie does. So a lot of times guys have had a lot of success casting because they're able to go and target specific areas that have 4 or 5 fish, where we may go through a trolling pass. And I know this past August, I had some clients out and, the screen looked like it was in demo mode, so a lot of times, plowing through and combining, we like to say, a few of those fish, obviously paying attention to speed and temp down there. I mean, that can really be a huge part of this. But it can go both ways, but, obviously we've had a lot more success with trolling just because of the bodies of water that we're fishing.
Well, I mean, I know here in Minnesota, I mean, if I'm being honest, right? I mean, the casting thing, the glide baits, and I think, Linder's played a big part in really starting that off. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I mean, it's it catches fish and it catches big fish. So.
Greg, you're a tournament angler. You're based in New York, and this year the NWT Championship is going to be in Dunkirk. We're actually going to talk to one of your competitors next, but how important is it to you to be able to fish that championship at home, having that in basically your home port? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it means a lot. I mean, Ed's a really good friend of mine. He's also one of my partners in crime, and we're going to be sharing hopefully some information. He can help me out on the river, and I can help him in Dunkirk if we can get there. It would mean a lot. I mean, obviously, it's going to take some miracles of some finishes. I know there's some obviously bodies of water that I haven't even been to. Along with, fishing current, which is I'm learning, using the Niagara as a background and hopefully getting out of Detroit here as soon as this ice is off. But it would mean the world. I mean, with the information that we've gathered over the last few years, but again, it is fishing, and these fish can do a lot of things that time of year. August is kind of a scary month. They can go from being on some shallow structure all the way out to the depths of, the Canadian water. So it could be very iffy of where and when, but I would love to be able to represent New York and represent some of the walleye guys around here. We've got a lot of guys that are tuning in tonight that are fierce competitors, and they're really good at their craft, and I'm learning a lot from them, as hopefully they're learning a lot from us as well. So, I'm really looking forward to the season. Again, it would mean with all the support that we've had with, companies like Mike's and Douglas and, guys like, the guys at Sager Marine helping us out with the boat this year. It would really mean the world.
All right. Here's one from Facebook, and it is, we're going to go with Larry Daisha. He says, do you use swivels when you're using your blade baits?
Mikey, you want to answer that just real quick?
If you're asking about the connection to the blade bait, no, I use a Roscoe snap on the ones that are included. No swivel. And when I connect my leader to my line, if you're asking about that, also no swivel. Learn to tie the knot. These don't spin like a spoon would, so you're not going to get line twist. There's no need for a swivel. Swivels are an additional mechanical connection that can fail. Just thinking about lifting those things tens of hundreds of thousands of times in a day, having that metal on metal wearing itself out, and it's going to break when you need it the most. But no, absolutely, I do not use a swivel. Also with the micro guides, I'm petrified of reeling one right through that and blowing the rod tip off. It's these new rods. Well, they are fantastic, but they are sensitive, and I would not encourage using a swivel for a blade bait.
Yeah, Tie Direct, I think would be our best bet for that one for sure.
All right, Trevor's got one here for you from Facebook.
This is kind of the basic one. Where do I find Douglas rods?
Perfect. There's a bunch of local retailers here in town, but also check out douglasoutdoors.com. You can find something close to you. Our expansion, we've got a lot of reps, traveling right now. The guys are down at the Bassmaster Classic. I know Donnie and Caleb are down there working a booth. So if you get a chance, douglasoutdoors.com. We've got a couple, like I said, local retailers that are in the upper New York State area, but we're coming at you. We're coming to the Midwest. I know Matty Reber's been fishing some Douglas. He's out in Iowa. So if you guys are out in the Midwest and you see Matty running around, ask him about his Douglas line. Along with Chancey Waters is also one of our bass guys that's been out there really working hard at trying to put some of those ditch pickles in the old live well. So we'll keep those guys afloat for sure. And please check us out we really appreciate the support.
Well, you don't have to answer this, but you're not lobbying them to do any trolling rods, are you?
That's classified.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured. But
we'll Freddie out in California. Freddie's a steelhead guy, so you're probably going to see a few more fly rods before
there you go. All right, that works.
All right, Craig and Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show, guys. Really appreciate your time and chat a little bit, something different, a little kind of rod and hand fishing there. But it was also good to talk to you guys, just kind of talk some tournament fishing, and you guys have a great night.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate having us.
All right, that's Craig and Mike, and really appreciate those guys. And we've got another guy from that neck of the woods, and he is another walleye tournament angler, and he is Ed Stahusky. Ed, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
We're just living the dream. I can't believe we get to sit here and talk about fishing for 3 hours straight. And
nice.
It's been fun having so many great guests and really an audience. We had a wonderful audience tonight.
Yeah,
a lot of great questions and just a lot of people tuning in to see what's going on. Ed, we wanted to have you on tonight to talk a little bit about Jan's Netcraft. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so fingers crossed. Been having a couple network issues. You've probably been watching on your end. So hopefully you can hear me okay and the video is coming through great. So I'm at Jan's right now at their shop, but they do most of their business, through catalog and online, but they do have a retail storefront here too. But been a sponsor of mine for a long time and great friends that I have here. But what's really great about Tacklecraft is if you want to make something unique or you feel like there's something that doesn't exist in the market, you have the capability to make whatever you need. So.
Yeah, I mean that's when I think Jan's, that's what I think of is the tackle crafting part of it. I mean, they've got like every component, known to man. Did they see a big push, during the panty here of people that were at home? Was that a thing where people were making more of their own tackle or?
Yeah, I think they saw both sides of that, right? You have people that had some time to do that, and then the ability to get things, right? So you have both of those things coming, and then probably more creative time for people, right? I know I tried some different stuff during the pandemic just to kind of like, well, I've always wanted to make this, so I might as well try it now. No better time than the present when you're locked up at home, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little bit of some of the product lines and what type of lures can you make? I mean, what does the lineup look like?
Yeah, so I was going to talk about a couple things, but there's things like jig molds, right? They've got the whole array. I think they might sell the most do-it molds in the so many of them they do. Up to the powder paint, everything for injection molded plastics, and then components for building, inline spinners, components for spoons, crankbait blanks. You've got everything for making harnesses. And I was going to talk a little bit about harnesses and particularly like clevises and like why you should choose one over another and kind of what I kind of look at when I'm pulling harnesses and why I go from, one clevis versus another. So.
Yeah, please do that. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, so I picked a really tricky component to show on a camera, right?
Especially with a network with a herky-jerky connection. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that like to be careful of, and it depends on like what kind of line you're going to tie or wire you're going to put your clevis on, but there is a clevis called wire clevis, and I'm going to hold that up there real nice and close.
Yeah, it shows
you can
so good actually.
Yeah, you can see that, right? It is a wire clevis, right? It's a single piece, right, with a hole drilled through it. Really good on wire because it has that very little friction, right? It's spinning real nice, but you do have some sharper edges on it. So if you're going to use wire line or actual wire and you're tying, an inline spinner, or you're tying harnesses up where you're pulling them through some pretty abrasive stuff, or you're dealing with pike, these clevises are pretty nice, right? Because they're going to spin on there, and you're going to dedicate that harness to one particular blade type, and you're going to reuse it over and over again. These are really nice, right? Pretty economical, and you can tie a ton up, and it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. You do not want to put this baby on mono or any type of regular line, right? Because these openings on here are going to start to wear holes or wear through that line, and you can break your line and lose everything, the whole kitchen sink behind it. So that's one type of clevis that, you're really going to use it with metal applications, like either this wire where you're bending up an inline spinner, like, making a weight forward spinner that you're going to cast for walleye, or even like inline spinners you're going to cast for trout or bass or muskie. The next type, which everybody's really familiar with, but probably have kind of had good and bad things with it, are these quick change clevises. And then hopefully you can see it really good, right here. Really great for when you want to change between, like, let's say, the water's really clear one day, or it's really dirty, and I want to change between, I'm going with a gold, or I'm going with a chartreuse blade, and I'm switching up really fast. What's really nice about it is, it just snaps on and off. Pretty cool, right? One of the things about these, though, they have a tendency, when a fish shakes, right, you've got that one blade and you're going, oh no. Yeah, we've all seen it, right? But they do have their applications, right? So like if I'm changing and I'm not using like really custom blades and things like that, I might use that if I'm running into situations where I'm changing colors, but I'm fishing snaggy stuff and I'm going to break some stuff off. I'm probably going to do something like that. And then the standard, like, that you'll see on a lot of tied harnesses is this just the folded clevis, right? So if you have like a money bait, right? You have that money blade and that money color, and you're just using it all the time, and it works in like certain light conditions on that body of water, and you want to make sure you don't lose that baby. There's no way it's coming off this, right? They're pretty economical, and you can tie up your specific things that you're going to use day in and day out, right? But then what came out a few years ago are these quick clevises, right? It's got like a little spring in it, right? But the inside of it's all smooth. There's really no way, unless you twist that blade and have it come off, that baby's going to come off. And you can run this thing on wire, mono, fireline, whatever you want to run it on. You're not going to run into an issue. So this is kind of what I use most of the time, right? Because I can get away with, using it on all different types of applications. If I get a wild hair and I want to change something, I can do that. I don't run into any issues. So, some days it's sunny, some days it's dark, you got clouds. I'm going to be switching between, say a silver back or a gold back or a painted back, right? And this thing, I've never lost a blade from a fish shaking. It just doesn't happen. It locked it in so tight. So, if you don't have these, make sure you put an order in for them, but I'm going to grab some before you can get them. So, make sure I get some, but, So I don't know if there's any questions on those things. I can talk spinners all day. You know, I grew up fishing them, you know, as a kid, you know, before we had even before we were doing planer boards on Lake Erie. I know I'm dating myself, but you know, we would just drift them off the side of the boat when we were pulling pulling Hottentots or wiggle warts and things like that. So, you know, they're just a tried and true bait. You know, you can get as tricky as you want with them or as simple as you want with them. You don't need, you know, all the fancy stuff to use them. They're, you know, you can literally let the wind kind of guide you and push you around to use them. So they're pretty versatile bait.
Do you guys, I mean, this is kind of a salmon perspective. Do you guys change bead colors a lot as well? I mean, I know a lot of times like we'll change, you know, bead colors underneath the same fly and it, you know, has a total different look. Is that okay, that answers that question, right?
Yeah, we do. So there's if you have like, you know, you want an assortment like walleye guys, we'll have hundreds of spinners tied up, right? Some tricks I've learned, like if you want to make some quick change ones where you want a bunch of beads on it, get a giant safety pin, right? Put 6 or 8, whatever, you know, kind of match it to your blade. So like, if I'm using like, you know, a big willow leaf, you know, I might be running up to like 12 beads with this, you know, 5 millimeters or 6 millimeters. If I'm running, you know, say a smaller Colorado, I might only need 6, right? So I'll have a safety pin loaded up with that, and then I can just put the line through that thing and drop them on there if I need to make a quick change. You know, it's a quick way to do it. I'm kind of obsessed, so I've got hundreds of them tied up, and some of them probably never been in the water. So.
All right, we're starting to get a few questions here. Let's start with Steve Morris. Steve says, on your worm harnesses, do you like twin blades or single blades?
You know, I'm probably 90% of the time single blades, but I'm typically, you know, using it in where more of the Eastern guys are going to go a lot faster with them. Most of the time I'm on the Western Basin or other applications where I'm pulling a little bit slower. And I'm switching between, like, I'm using Colorados a lot, you know, things, and something to pay attention to in the Colorados is like the back of the blade's color, right? That's just as important as the front of the blade's color. And, you know, there are some times where I'll run a double willow leaf, but that's usually like clear open water and I'm running really fast, right? So I'm looking to cause as much flash out there. It's not about the vibrations, more about the flash and making it look like a school of bait moving through versus presenting a wounded, slower bait. Yeah.
All right. Greg's got a question from Facebook. Greg wants to know if you can talk about the different sizes in blades.
Oh boy. Yeah. So some of it's about matching the hatch. And some of it's about, you know, how speed sensitive you want that bait to be. So, and then the other part of it is, you know, what part of the water column you're fishing. If I'm fishing near the bottom, I tend to downsize my blades. I go with Colorado blades. I get more lift out of that blade, so I can kind of work it on that bottom and have like more forgiveness. If I'm fishing higher up in the water column, the forage is bigger, I'm gonna upsize my blade. You know, it's not unheard of for me to go use even up like a 7 or 8 size Colorado blade and some pretty big willow blades. When you get these fish in your live well and you bounce them around and they vomit up a 1 pound silver bass or a giant shad, they're not afraid of a blade that big. And you get them on crankbaits that are 4 inches long plus with the bill. So you take that into consideration. You know, it really depends on what's in that forage basin and what time of year it is too, right? Because the size kind of varies on the forage as the year progresses.
Larry over on Facebook again asked, and you mentioned this, you have hundreds of liters tied up. What pound test line do you tie with, and mono or fluoro?
I'm more of a fluoro guy. I tend to stick around a 15 pound test fluorocarbon. I like leader material fluorocarbon. It's a little bit stiffer, but it's more abrasion resistant. We started switching to recently is it's a soft steel super stretch fluorocarbon. It has, you know, all the properties of regular fluorocarbon as far as being invisible in the water, but also has great knot strength, really abrasion resistant, and it actually stretches, you know, versus, let's say, traditional fluorocarbon leader material. But I like that. The only time I might run a mono is if I'm fishing shorter harnesses. I'm fishing bouncers and I'm fishing them on the bottom in a river where I'm pulling them downstream. I like the the mono because I get more lift out of that leader.
Yeah, that's a key little detail. Trebles or singles?
Yeah. I'm a singles guy. You know, I know people will get mad at me for that, but just because I'll say I have ADD where I'm moving it in the water column. So I like dropping baits and raising baits all the time. So the single I can get away with, you know, skirting around on the bottom a lot better. But I typically tie a 3-hook single. It's really important that, you know, you get really familiar with how to lay that bait in your hand as you're tying it. But once you tie up a few of the you know, the Snell knots, you can do it in a minute, right? You can tie a 3-hook harness in a minute. It doesn't take long, but I like it just because I can get, you know, better spacing out of that. So like if I might space them like that far apart, right? We were playing up here. Bob was trying to test me if he could tie him faster than me. I don't know. I think we're kind of neck and neck, but I got him on the stinger hooks. So I got him on that. So yeah, I like the singles. It gives me more ability to run closer to the bottom. But if you're fishing suspended fish, you know, that a light wire treble hook gives you more hook points. You know, I even know guys that'll bend the harnesses, or sorry, bend them so you get 2 points sticking them. So that would be like an example there of a one with a treble, and that's about what typically the spacing a guy's going to run on it, right? And then with this, you know, you kind of get like that hand length between the two, right? So when you're tying it up, you get a good reference point. Unless you got really little hands, then you might want to go a hand length and that. You know.
Cool.
All right, we got a question from Captain Lance Valentine once again. He'd like to know what's your favorite line for tying harnesses, and then, well, geez, I guess we just asked.
We just asked that, yeah.
So that was Lance's
I doubled that one up. So
I missed you there.
Yeah, no.
All right.
Yeah.
Lance is an old friend of mine, so yeah, I was expecting a zinger from him. So
we get a few of those once in a while.
Yeah.
Jim would like to know: do you build slow death harnesses?
You know, I tie slow death harnesses sometimes, but there's one from Walleye Nation I like. I think it's called the Double Trouble harness. So it has a treble hook in front of it and one behind it. So I'll use those at times, and they have a float on them. I do tie though. Man, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'll tie them behind the smaller spoons. So like you can buy the spoon blanks here, and I'll tie up and there's no beads in between that spoon and the slow death, and just a gap between it, right? And then you got all the flash like a Dodger for here's an example of like the spoon I'm talking about. Not really necessarily how this harness is behind it, but I'll just put a gap between here, and then I'll have a slow death just kind of working behind that. And when they're really finicky, that flash, it's like a Dodger, right? It's going through the water, and then they just see this dumb worm. I don't know what the hell they think it is. It's just going, you know, kind of running around in a circle behind it, and they're just curious, right? And then it doesn't smell bad, so they eat it, right?
I think we might have coaxed a secret out of you there, so that's good.
Yeah.
And here's your zinger. This one's from Ryan Miller. He wants to know who's the best stick on the team, you, Van Dyke, Sleeman, or Deffabaugh?
Yeah, can I say no comment? Right?
That's the safe answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great group of guys I get to travel with this year. You know, I've got to know them all well over time. Wayne, you actually got to pronounce it Wanye if you ever meet him. That's the real pronunciation of Wayne. Wanye Midwest. Great guy. I've known him forever. I'll say this: I guided him on his first 10 pounders, so he will never admit it. But and then Craig, great up and coming angler. It's not like he doesn't know what he's doing. He's been doing it for a long time, but he's made the jump full time over onto the NWT. So I'm really excited to see what he does this year. And Mike, man, yeah, per tournament in the NWT, I'm a statistics guy. There's nobody that has better stats than him. I just done more of them. That's all. Yeah.
All right. One more quick question for you before we let you go. We got Captain Paul Powis. I see him. He's down in the green room waiting to go, but people want to know more about Jan's Netcraft. How do they do it? What's the best way for them to find out more?
Yeah, jansnetcraft.com. You can log on there. You can get sent a catalog, right? And some people really like the paper catalog and really get to look at everything on there and really find details. So come down to the store and Maumee. That's another option, but online, get the catalog, get on the mailing distribution, and you can find out everything they have from rod building all the way to tackle craft. So
awesome. Ed, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate you having on. You're always a great guest, and it was good talking to you tonight. Good luck and safe travels out there on the tournament trail this year.
I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you guys. Thank you, everybody.
All right, that's Ed Stahusky. A little bit of work here to clean up. We had Josh Lehman was the winner question of the segment for Craig's segment. And let's bring in another guy we enjoy having on the show, and he is Captain Paul Powis. Let's get rid of that out of here. There he goes. Captain, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
We're having a great show. Lots of awesome guests. And again, really appreciate the crowd and the audience tonight.
Who's that guy beside you there, though, Chris?
Well, Chris said to me about a couple weeks ago, he's like, I got a spot to fill. Need somebody that can talk really fast. Do we have any Canadians on? And I said, Powis.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah, because there's nothing on Netflix and I got nothing better to do.
Right. Okay. Well, good. Well,
no
thanks
hockey tonight. That's good.
All kidding aside, thanks for coming on tonight.
Always my pleasure, guys. You guys do a good job. Appreciate it.
Well, Paul, we wanted to have you on and talk Wolverine tackle tonight. Looks like you got a nice little setup there in front of you.
Man, what a mess. I put everything away in a little bit in too much of a hurry. I spent an hour today sorting, and I still got probably way too many to sort through. So,
well, walk us through what you got going on there from in the streaks.
Well, there's lots of things to talk about, but today was just like I compile all my stuff in piles, right? Needs hooks, needs split rings, needs to be clean, needs to be this, needs to be that. And then I have another section where, you know what, this thing might catch 4 or 5 more fish before it gets repainted or retaped. But typically, like I talked to Chip the other day, and I did a little history before this, because I know they've been around forever, but I didn't know how long forever was. They've been in business 38 years, and I've been using them for well over 30, and it's just a staple bait for us on Lake Erie. I guide on Lake Erie only now, exclusively. I used to do some Lake Ontario stuff and some Lake Huron, but my Erie business is so strong that it takes up all my time, so I don't bother with anything else. But little history, they've been around since '84. They make 4 different sizes. A lot of people aren't familiar with that. So they make that junior, which I'll get into the how everything works for me in my fishery. That's a junior. This is a mini. And then from the mini, you go to the regular size streak. And then from there, you go to the mag. So most of the mags are like a king bait, but don't be afraid to run them for walleyes. Lengthwise, they come from 2 1/4 all the way up to 4 3/4. The mini's 3 1/4. The regular size is 4 inch. One of the things that I had a discussion with Chip about, and Chip's the real deal. He makes them, he fishes them. He's a charter captain, And anytime two charter captains start shooting the baloney, there's some good information there. If there's a couple of cocktails involved, there's even way more information. It's just you can't remember it the next day. Isn't that right, Trevor? And
I don't do that stuff anymore.
well, that's because we've been all locked up so flipping long. We're due, brother. But one of the things that I share with clients and or customers that want to learn the game, and they get stuck in ruts. They get stuck in a spot where they fish the same. Last year they fished this bait. This year they fished the exact same spot. Does that, I get clients that call me and say, "Hey, I don't want Friday the 26th of July." And I go, "Why not?" "Well, it rained last year." I'm like, "Guys, it's not that precise. It's not going to rain on July. It might, and probably will, to prove me wrong." But I talk to people about profile of baits. My biggest thing is profile first, color second. Like when choosing a bait, and you get the proverbial question all the time, "What's your favorite lure?" And I not to be a smart aleck, but at the end of the day, my favorite lure is the one that's just caught fish, because I have many favorites, and just to pick one would be impossible because he's got thousands and thousands of color patterns. But one of the things on Erie, especially, the walleyes are extra fond of copper, and we've been expanding with some other uses of copper, and we run silver, we run copper, but mostly copper. And then the last few years, Chip's been messing around with some of the hot pinks and the hot greens as well. So like the antifreeze colors, he started them on blades a few years back, and they took off. And he's making a lot more baits that have those colors. So the thing that makes Erie unique for us on the North Shore of Erie is we get the steelies as well. So there was kind of a progression. Years ago, we used to fish crankbaits all the time, like deep diving crankbaits. But for anybody that trolls and has hooked a king or a steely on the back hook of a crankbait, and that steely or king says, "I'm not coming to the boat," they make a hell of a mess. So we started switching to spoons just because of the simplicity of how they run and how they track better. And if a fish decides to go on a super crazy run and want to go through all your stuff, there's a lot less chance of tangling up. So Silver Streak's been around for a long time. Like I said, Chip Cartwright, he's second generation, and they've been doing it a long time, and they know what's going on, and they know what colors work in different ports and the rest of it. And we're mostly a spoon bite. We've been a spoon bite for the last 5 or 6 years. I've been starting to introduce a few crankbaits into the repertoire just to try to keep the junk off. So as the size of smelt progress, they start out little like everything else, and as the year goes on, they get bigger. So I start out with those juniors, and then I move into the minis, and then I run into the full size. And I very rarely will use mags, but late August, mid-September, I'll put some out just to keep the silver bass at bay, or the sheephead. Just the bigger baits seem to work pretty good. So I'm sure, is there some questions in line, or you guys got some questions for me?
Yeah, we're getting a bunch of questions coming here.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, here's a good friend of yours, Captain Jamie Shane, and he's going to ask you to do something you don't want to do, and that is name your best colors last year. So I think he may want to know just to get some intel for his boat. But what were
He
your
already
best
knows
colors
what's
for
going
last
on.
year?
That's another strange, like at the end of the day, and where we are, we all share. And if somebody's not sharing properly, they get put in the penalty box. And if you're on a bait that's crushing them and doing pretty good, Jamie, really hard. But I got to stick with Jerry Lee because it's been a favorite of mine for a long, long time. If you made me pick one, I'd say it's a Jerry Lee. I dug this baby out of the archives today, and I think it's still got a couple more charters left in it, but it's pretty beat up. And they get crushed, and you replace hooks and you cut the tape off so it's not dragging, and they still work. But pinks are always good, oranges are good, purples are good. There's lots of combinations. They all have their time of day when they're good. But I don't think there's a day that goes by that we don't at least put one Jerry Lee out. And when they're really on, you put 6 of them out. So
I'm proud to say that I knew Jerry Lee, and he was a cool dude. So
never met the man, but one of the best quotes in the marina. One of my fellow charter captains, when people ask him about Jerry Lee, he says that bait paid the mortgage on my house, because he catches a lot of fish on it, as we all do. But that I'm stealing somebody else's line. So, we mix them up and we fish them different ways. Jamie fishes very similar to how I do. We run the rigger program. We run a big dipsy program. When the fishing's super good and guys are paying you for 6 hours and you can get it done in 2.5, you just bring rods in. So you pull the boards and you run 3 dipsies aside and a couple of riggers and go that route. And you can run them off lead. You can run a spoon off pretty much anything. You can run them off dipsies. You can run them off jets. You can run them off cookies. The riggers, of course, sliders on the riggers, fixed sliders, free sliders, pretty much any salmon technique that's out there. You can put that in your repertoire and catch walleyes on Lake Erie with it.
Steve Morris, been with us most of the night here over on YouTube. Do you match your dipsies to your lures as far as colors go?
To a certain extent. There's so many different hues of different colors, from greens to purples to pinks to blacks to everything. They all have their day. I have done that in the past. I do that more with the jets than I do with the dipsies. I don't think it makes a huge difference on the dipsies. Sometimes it does. Like, you'll get one side that's on fire and the other side's not going. It's same bait, same depth, same everything. We use line counters as most the trollers do nowadays. And it's like, okay, so why is this one working and this one isn't? It's all about figuring it out. Like, the best captains are, it's not about seeing 10,000 fish caught in their lifetime. It's the game, and it's figuring it out. That's the part that we like. And there's nothing more rewarding than figuring out today's puzzle. So, like, we mess around and it's like, okay, I'm catching all these fish on a number one dipsy on the port side, and the other side's got the same color bait, different color dipsy. I'm running them at the same zone. The speed's the same, obviously. Why is this one out fishing? So the easiest way to figure it out is to pop it off that side, switch it from a left to a right, and put it over on the other side of the boat and see if it goes there. And there are days, not a lot of them, but I actually will say it's got to be the dipsy. I'll change the color of the dipsy and it's game on. It doesn't happen a lot, but when you got, like, the best part is something's working, you want everything to work, and it's really tricky to dial that in. And it happens on riggers, it happens on dipsies, it happens on jets. So the short answer to, do I try to match the spoon to the dipsy? Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it'll make a difference between yes and no. Like, if you're fishing a tournament, I would play with them till find out which ones are your best performers and go from there.
That leads to a really good question. You're kind of segueing into Doug's question. Doug wants to know, after how many fish on one color do you call that a pattern?
Great question. So, Doug, you've seen my seminars that up until COVID, he's been to a lot of them. So I'm a firm believer of 1 is a fluke, 2 is the start of a pattern, and 3 is a go. So when I'm setting up, first rods in are usually my riggers. If I get riggers to go at a certain depth and certain color, I don't know if it's the depth or the color. So I'll figure that out in a hurry by putting this. If a rigger goes off 3 times in a row with the same bait, I'm in the midst of changing almost everything. Probably 3 to 6 dipsies and 2 riggers will all have the same color bait on, and I can figure that out pretty quick. And I need to know, first of all, is it the depth that's catching why I'm getting bit, or is it the color? And I will do that by using the same depth with a different color. If it doesn't go, and the one that just went for the 3rd time, that bait comes off, and I'll replicate it exact. So if it's getting bit at 32 down on a rigger, the other one's 32 down with the same spoon, and that's the depth I'll target with my dipsy program. And from there, I'll start stretching out the board rods to get in the same zone. And it's all about icon, 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 and play connect the dots.
I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna combo two questions here, and
Sure.
it's not the, it's actually not that one. But Jim asks, at what water temp do you start looking for to run spoons for a spoon bite? And then kind of the other part of that, and I think they go together, is how do you target both bows and walleyes in the same spread?
Okay, so temperature is not a big thing in the spring. I'm looking for the warmest water possible because the bait seems to be attracted to that warmer water. So that's part one of that. The temperature in the column, usually earlier on in the year, the warmer water is up at the top. I find a lot of people fish under the fish, and they just because they don't see them on their graph doesn't mean they're not there. They're just in the top 8 to 10 feet. A lot of times you're missing it. And then up until the last couple of years, Trevor, I typically fished bottom program with inline boards and crawler harnesses. And then as the water warms up and those fish move out of the western end because it gets a little soupy, they want the deeper, colder water. And then I'm targeting my fish in deeper water and warmer water, and they're more aggressive in the warmer water, obviously. And then that's the $1 million question about steelhead, because it never fails. If you show up to Erio, you say, "Are we going to catch steelhead today?" And I'll go, "Well, I don't know where they are, but I can pretty much tell you we're going to catch 36 walleyes in a few hours." And then you're going to say, "No, I want to catch steelhead." So we're going to go looking for the coldest water I can find for the steelies. And sometimes it sets up that we get both, and they're all in the same water. But if you want to be specific to one species versus another, colder water usually holds the steelhead. And if the bait's there, there'll be walleyes mixed in with them. But we've had times where I lost my light there, but I guess that doesn't matter. We've had times that a rod goes off. It's a walleye, goes off again, it's another walleye, goes off the third time, it's a steely, you put it back down again, it's another steely and another walleye. There's no rhyme or reason. I wish you could say if you want a steelhead trip, we're going to go here. If you want a walleye trip, we're going to go here. It's not that simple. Sometimes it is, but overall it's not. So as much as that's a dance around the barn with you there on that.
No, I get it. I mean, a lot of captains kind of the same thing. It's, steelhead are everybody's favorite fish that they hate. So it's
yeah. Well, exactly.
Yeah.
We are lucky though in Erio where we have a phenomenon there. We have the point of pins, which it's a big, long, drawn out point, and that's what makes Erio so cool. Because the first 10 miles you're driving on your truck and trailer you're going that far out on the lake and you don't even realize it. And you get out of the harbor and you can hit 60 feet in a mile or two. Some of the other ports that are off to the east of us, they got to travel, 10, 12, 14 miles to get 65 feet of water. So the upside of it too is it acts as a giant back eddy, and and Erie's famous for current. And we've talked long and hard about that over the years and that's why the Fishhawk makes such a difference out there. And we have that phenomenon on the other side of the point where sometimes that water is like 15 to 20 degrees colder than out in front of the harbor, like after a big wind. And it's always, we draw straws and say, nobody's been around the point in a while. Nobody's been around the point in a while. And you don't want to be the guy that goes there blind because you're leaving fish to look for fish, which is a no-no. But on the same token, not to say that when the walleyes are going, there's those days where it's like, I wish the steelies would show up just for a couple days, just to pound on them because it's so much fun. So we're constantly checking that water temperature around the corner. And if it's super cold, a lot of times the steelies are in there munching. So that's what we do.
All right. Blind Osprey checks in with us quite a bit as well. And he wants to know what's your favorite speed for running spoons?
I run fast. I run super fast. The only time I slow down is when I have to. The reason for that is I'm covering a lot more water. I had some friends, all charter captains from Quinte, that came down to fish with me probably 3-4 years ago now. And they were absolutely blown away of how fast I troll. And they're like, dude, Nobody trolls it. I go, well, we do here. It keeps the junk off. Your baits seem to be way more aggressive, and we smash them. So, and there's no denying it, 3.5, 4 miles an hour when even a small fish hits it, because the reaction to the rod and the reel and everything is just so much stronger by speed. But my whole thing is, if you're trolling 2 mile an hour and I'm trolling 4 miles an hour, I'm covering double the water you are. So I'm constantly looking at my electronics, and the biggest judgment for me to see whether I'm going to stay in a spot, if I can throw 5 icons in over a mile stretch and I'm catching fish regularly through that stretch of the icons, it's waypoint save, 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 save. I use my electronics, Fishhawk included. What's my speed and temp at the ball, and I replicate it going back the other way. So if I'll do a spin, the fish start to taper off, I'll do a spin, and I'll just hit those icons in reverse order, and I will stay there until boat traffic or we've caught them all. So, and I like to fish by myself usually, like at less boats, because then you don't have to pay as close attention to play bumper boats with your planer boards and the rest of it. But that I like to go fast. I'll slow down. I've done it where I've slowed down because you got a big fish and the hook's in the side of the head or something, and you'll slow down and every rod will load up. And I've had it where as soon as you bring her back up to speed, every rod will load up. So the short answer is I like to troll fast generally, but there are times where you got to mess with it to get them to go, because there's nothing more frustrating than you see them on the graph, they're there, and you need to get them to bite. So you mess with that speed, and a lot of people will mess with speed, which is part one of the scenario. You need to keep mental track of, okay, what did I do different that rod just went? And it could be anything as subtle as a slow port turn, and the slow side goes, or you speed up a bit for the other side, and you mess with it. But the key is, once you get it, stay on it until something changes. So don't be stuck in a rut that Captain Paul says he trolls fast all the time. I troll fast most of the time, and it works. But if it doesn't work, I'm constantly changing. I'm changing colors, I'm changing depths, I'm changing location, and I'm changing speed.
All right, Paul, we really appreciate you coming on, staying up late with us tonight, and
past my bedtime. I'm not gonna lie. I got my slippers on already, boys.
Yeah.
No,
that's the beauty of the virtual. I mean, you don't have to wear pants,
right?
It's
oh no, I have to.
Yeah.
Well, it's Paul Powis, and you can find more about him at his website, jpfish.com, and check out Wolverine Tackle at wolverinetackle.com. Paul, once again, appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. You guys are doing a good job, and I'm privileged to be your only Canadian here tonight, Trevor. And I think it's by default, but hey, it makes me feel good regardless. All right. So I hope to see you guys soon. Stay safe, and I appreciate you. Anybody wants to give me a holler, send me an email, ask me questions. I find doing these a lot of times people are too nervous to actually ask. You fire me an email and ask me questions. I'll help you with, rod selections, picking baits, whatever. So I'm available.
That for sure. So,
all right, fellas, appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care. You bet.
Thank you.
All right, Captain Paul Powis, and no one predicted that he would go over. But, but he did. He's a great egg. I love having him on the show. He's always good to talk to. Speaking of going over, and a guy likes to talk a lot, it is. Let's get rid of Paul. Hey, Paul, one more time. Have a
Thanks,
great night.
fellas.
All right, there he is, Mr. Pat Calmerton, Captain Pat Calmerton. How you doing tonight?
I am well. How are you, gentlemen?
We're good.
Yeah, we're getting a little crazy now. It's getting late, and we're getting a little goofy. Just talked to Paul for a while. Now we got you.
It's about to get a whole lot goofier here, gentlemen. It always does.
Yeah. All right, Pat. You're based out of Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Wolfpack Adventures is the charter, and we're going to talk some bait tonight. Tell us about what we got going on with you.
Well, I tell you, I suppose this is the Yakima thing. So we got a ton of different Yakima products that we can go over. All different, I guess, all different species, all different things. It all depends on if you want to troll, if you want to pitch rooster tails. We have sky's the limit here, gentlemen.
Okay, I'll help focus you.
Yeah.
I've been seeing ads for the spin fish.
Yep.
Do you have
Okay.
spin fishes there you can show us?
Yes, I do. Matter
All
of
right.
fact,
Tell us all about this. Tell us all about the spin fish. That one kind of intrigues me here in the Great Lakes.
Well, that's a wonderful thing. Over on Northwest Pacific, it came through a couple of years ago, and they started running it a lot more. It's a real tight wobble. So basically, what a spin fish is, it's right here. I don't know how good that.
Yeah, we can see it pretty good. Yeah.
What's that?
We can see it pretty good. Yep.
All right, perfect. So this here is a spin fish. What it is you can separate it, and it is a cut bait plug. So it has a spinning rotation and more of a subtle rotation. You can take it and run it behind any dipsy by itself. You can run it behind lead core by itself. It has a real tight wobble. So what you do is you open it up and you take cut bait, shrimp, tuna, herring, whatever the case may be. You pack it inside. A lot of times what people will do is they'll spray some scent cure in there and stuff like that and close it up. Now there's a couple of different holes on the front side, one on the right, one on the left. So you can either have it spin counterclockwise or the other way.
That would be clockwise.
That would be clockwise, sir.
Hey, it can spin either clockwise or counterclockwise. There's holes on the bottom side to disperse that scent. There's holes on the front side to disperse that scent. So it comes pre-rigged with a fluorocarbon leader and 2 hooks on the back side. You can run it plain. You can run it behind divers. You can run it behind the fish flash. Usually you want to do the same fly length. So it all depends on what apparatus you have in front. So if you're running the fish flash and there's not much drag on this, there's 0 drag. So it just spins through the water on a real tight wobble, just like so. And then that fish flash will create the attraction to it. So you're going to use that a lot, to clear the water. The smaller the fish flash, a lot of times you're going to run anywhere between 20 to 30, 25 inches behind that fish flash, and all it's going to do is drag behind. There's not much action to this other than spinning in the water and dispersing that scent coming through. Now, as you're going to get deeper, you're looking for more kings, you're doing such like that, you can get into the rotating paddles and the 8-inch all the way up to the 10-inch or whatnot. And you're going to, the bigger the paddle, the longer the lead, the warmer the water, the shorter the distance between the paddle and the spin fish. So this thing is really cool. It comes in a lot of different colors. It comes in a lot of different sizes, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. So you can get in there, swap it out. Here's a bigger one right here. So we have a lot of different variety. So you have smaller, bigger, just to throw more scent into the water. And a lot of times, if you're looking for a little bit more lethargic, the little bit more lethargic fish. So they're not going to be extremely active. You're throwing more scent. It's a tighter wobble, and these things have really taken off on the Great Lakes. A lot of people are starting to run them. For years we were talking about spinning glows, and for years we were talking about mag lips, and now the new fad is definitely the spin fish.
How does action wise, Pat? How does that compare to a bait head? On a meat rig? Is it kind of that similar 1 second flip or what?
Correct. It's basically a dying herring is what it's representing. So all it is depending on what side of the lip that you put it on, it spins, and you're not going to have your fly whipping back and forth. So like on a fly, there's hardly any weight. You want it to kind of lag behind and kind of go all the way back and forth, where this is going to be a tighter wobble, and it's going to spin a little bit more aggressive than the bait rigs themselves, but it's going to add a lot more flash. It's going to be more contained, and you're going to have a lot of the scent in there more because of the housing of this that it's going to capture it, but yet across the top there's scent beads, and across the bottom to release that fish as the water kind of comes down through it.
Cool.
All right, a little bit of housekeeping for Paul's segment. We've got Doug Orton as the winner. You can send us a message through Facebook with your address. And then for Ed's segment, we got Larry Daisha. If you got questions for Pat Calmerton, go ahead and put them in. We've got about 15 minutes left in the show. Pat, tell us a little bit about kind of how your setups change throughout the year. Obviously, we've got situation where you're not getting on the water right now, but when you're starting to first get out on the water, how does your bait selection change throughout the season?
Bait selection, it basically you start small and go big. You start more of the wobble, more of the slow presentation, stuff like that before you get up into the real fast vibration. The colder water, the more gentler or the more lethargic of the action that you want. So as you're coming through, you're doing a lot of river stuff during the walleye trail, or not even the trail, but once you start getting into the walleye fishing, and a lot of times early spring like this, we're going to go after our brown trout, we're going to go after our lake trout, we're going to go after some of that stuff that is going to come into the warmer waters. You're looking for the bigger rocks, you're looking for the warmer water in the rivers, anywhere that there's a discharge, anything like that. Now, a spin fish, a lot of people are sitting there saying, I'm going to use them for salmon and salmon only. Well, don't forget that these walleyes, they also go on a scent on really dark cloud water as well. So when you start getting into some of the river systems, some of the shallower bays and stuff, and all that runoff is coming off of the shorelines, you're going to start getting into that. We're going to start fishing the skinny water. We're going to start using the baits that don't have that real erratic, wobble and vibration and scent and everything like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these spin fish, we're going to throw them back on maybe a color of lead core, 2 colors of lead core. We're going to run them without any flasher. We're just going to get them to go in that real clear water and, produce some bait, produce some strikes that way. The other thing that you're going to do is you're going to start smaller. So, as that goes, we're going to be going a little slower with that. So now with that being said, we're using a lot of shallow diving sticks along with our spin fish. We're also going to be using some smaller fish flash with some of our spin fish. And, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll even do some of the little fat fish on there. We'll get those. We'll get the fat fish. What these here are doing is they're just going to come down and, they're going to be a real loud, real small presentation, and they're going to be a smaller bait fish, because early in the spring like that, you're not going to have those alewives that are going to be that 5-6 inches. They're going to be smaller, and as the time goes on, they're going to continue to go. Then once we start getting into past that, then we're going to graduate up, and once that water temp starts going up a little bit, then we're going to start getting into some of our mag lips, and we're going to get to spreading things out a little bit. We're going to start using a lot more boards early in the season like that, get them out away from the boat, and continue through like that way.
All right, we've been talking a lot about the spin fish and using scents. What's kind of your go-to scent? What are you using out in the boat when you're chasing salmon?
I'm cutting up alewives. Throwing them inside, chopping them up, putting some garlic in there, getting that going. Jared over at Higginbotham, he's a strong believer. You get some of that shrimp and you stuff it in there. You get some of that herring, tuna, stuff like that. Throw it in there, get more oily. So you get a lot more of that oil scent coming out and that sheen coming through, and those fish can smell it a lot better. And you chop that all up. It's the same technique all the way down through. Those fish they're programmed to eat. It's kind of like us ice fishing, where down in Milwaukee Harbor when we're ice fishing, we'll use shrimp and we'll use stuff like that, and it's not native here. but those fish are programmed to eat that scent, that smell, that, you know, there's a lot of times you and I will walk into a restaurant and something smells really good that we've never had before. We got to try it.
So does that mean you've actually tried a little bit of that alewife with garlic on there, or?
Oh yeah, I mean a little salt. I mean, when you're chopping everything up and I got to eat, I mean, I'm
Right,
going
yeah,
to
just
sandwich. I get
all right. We got quite a few questions coming in here. What pick one there, Chris?
All right. Donnie wants to know, does the spin fish work for targeting Lakers as well?
Yes. Spinfish will definitely target running Lakers. And there again, when you're doing the targeted Lakers, all depends on how you're doing it. If you're taking your mag divers and you're digging bottom and stuff, you're going to go a real short lead behind that, and you're going to have that cloud bumping the bottom, because you want that. You almost want that diver when you're fishing lake trout, especially on a wire diver. You want it digging bottom. And if you're not digging bottom, you ain't catching the fish that you're normally catching. These things, they produce really well behind the wire divers. They produce really well on the coppers. You know, real deep for them lake trout. Now, I'm not leaving my downriggers completely up. I mean, I am running my downriggers, but a lot of times I'll run my spinning glows and stuff like that off my downriggers and these off of my wire divers.
All right. Colin says, does the type of scent that you use change depending on what species that you're targeting, or is it the same?
No, it's pretty much the same. I mean, I haven't become that scientific on it, to be honest with you. All those fish they're there to eat. They're eating the same prey fish right now. So it's one of them where I try to match a hatch on some of them, and other ones I definitely throw some cure and stuff like that to get extra scent in there.
All right. Steve, speaking of location, he'd like to know, what areas do you look for when you're targeting brown trout in the spring?
Oh man. Well, I'll tell you honest, boy, I'm going to be honest with you. I spend a lot of time north. I go from the Pigeon River all the way up to the course. I'm running anywhere from that 6 foot out to 20 foot. There's a pretty good ledge in there. Most of the time I position my boat in that 12-foot range. And, you know, I run my boards out quite a ways. That's where I'm going to the north. I'm pounding pretty heavily to the north. It's no secret. And then to the south, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out. I'm going to start at the power plant. I'm going to continue trolling south all the way down. Some days you're going to, you know, if it's a real sunny day, that south is going to be better because all that sand off of Terry Andrew is going to warm up. You're going to have a lot of those fish move in sooner than you are to the north. North, you're going to have a lot of big rocks. You're going to have a lot of structure for those fish to hang out in. And I don't recommend you running a lot of divers up into that area unless you really know what you're doing, because you're going to lose a lot of equipment. You know, so Sheboygan is a great big bowl, you know, and Lake Michigan is a big bowl. That's what makes Sheboygan real nice, is you got the ledge out 80 to 120, where you have a real steep drop where everybody is kind of working past that July mark. But if you're coming in early in the spring, you're going to run real skinny water. You're going to run to the north and the south, and the north you have rocks, to the south you have sand. So
all right. Clyde Richardson, he wants to know, how do you decide which size of the fish flash that you're going to use?
Fish flash, what size? I am going to, earlier in the spring, I'm going to go smaller. I'm going to go smaller early in the spring. It's colder weather. You're not throwing that much of a flash out. I would say majority of the time, I am going to use the smaller 3 sizes when that water temperature is a little bit colder. And as the season continues, I'm going to up it a little bit. So it's just like if you fish out there quite a bit and you're running, you know, your double-aught Dodgers and triple-aught Dodgers during the real early for your rainbows and browns and all that. And then all of a sudden you start switching over to the 8-inch flash as far as the rotating flashers. You're going to start running a lot of those 8-inch until I would say probably August. Once you get into the August, that bait fish starts getting bigger, your plugs start getting bigger. your presentation starts getting bigger. That's when you start getting more of the flash. Cloudy days, I like to run bigger flash than I do sunny days, just because of the amount of flash, depending how deep I'm trolling. If I'm going to be below 100 foot, I'm going to go a little bit bigger just to catch as much, I guess, attention as I can down that deep.
All right. So last one, Pat. Donnie, I'd like to know, how do we purchase the spin fish?
Go to yakimabait.com and you can look at that stuff. You could find some of them at a few of the retailers around here. I'm not quite sure what ones all carry it because it's new to this area. I shouldn't say new to this area, but newer to this area. But you can certainly just go to Yakima, yakima.com and try to figure out who's all carrying them.
All right, Clyde Richardson, you get the question of the segment. Pat, you're the last guest of the night, so we appreciate you staying up late with us. But here's a question I have for you. What are you looking forward to this year? What do you see? What's your kind of outlook for Lake Michigan salmon on the Wisconsin side?
I'm excited about it. You know, the sizes continue to keep going up year after year. The sizes are getting bigger and bigger. All the different baits and all the different presentations that we have and all the different new stuff, and trying to figure out, does it pay to run all this new stuff or does it pay to run the old school stuff? So it's more of a learning game. I think that the salmon are last year we had really good numbers in the fall up in the river system, you know, when we were fly fishing and stuff, and you really get to see what is happening as far as the fishery. So I'm excited about it. I truly am.
Awesome. You guys want to find out more about Pat Calmerton, you can go to his website. It's wolfpackadventures.com. And you've also got that Facebook page that I've joined and really like to see. It's Get Them Kids Outdoors. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I would love to tell you about that. You know, all of us started when we were young. We had the tutelage of our fathers, our mothers, our aunts, uncles, neighbors, whatever, that got us out fishing. And it's a lifelong passion. My dad always said there's only one Bill Schrader of Sheboygan County that went pro in a sport, but fishing is a lifelong activity. It's not only fishing, it's fishing, hunting, hiking, tubing. I don't care what you're doing. Today's world is so consumed with electronics that I created this page just because I do everything with my kids. Matter of fact, a couple of weekends ago, I went out battle on Bagger. I took a picture of the car, and I honestly thought I forgot something. I sent it to my wife, and she said, "You're missing your kids, because your kids are with you all the time, hunting, fishing, whatever we're doing." Matter of fact, we're leaving next weekend again to go on another trip. So it's one of them where it puts the passion and the excitement back into the outdoors for me tremendously. So I encourage everybody else to. I also encourage everybody to jump on there, show their support to the future generation. Get on there and share your stories. We're all intrigued by them, and not only that, but it also pushes us to try to create more stories and post ourselves. So.
Very good, Pat. Again, appreciate you coming on. It's always good to talk to you. Always good to have you on. Good luck out there on Lake Michigan this year, and hope you have a lot of success with your charter clients and a safe season.
Gentlemen, appreciate you having us, and look forward to seeing you again. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, take care. That's Pat Calmerton from Wolfpack Adventures. Again, just love to have him on the show. Just want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. It was an incredible night. Blown away by how many people were watching, actually. But tomorrow,
I think there was a lot of people like start to finish.
Yeah, exactly. So it was very cool that you guys stuck around with us and hung out with us all night long. Tomorrow, and even I don't even want to say more, but a star-studded night tomorrow as well. We got Captain Richard Hajecki, we got Captain Pete Alex, Captain Lance Valentine, we got Captain Bob Hines, Greg Yarborough, Captain Bart Kulak, Captain Casey Prisco, Captain Jim Steele.
I'm just looking at the list here. I mean, we got a pretty heavy duty Ontario lineup tomorrow.
Yeah, a lot of Ontario stuff, some Erie stuff. Yeah, just an awesome night, and then we'll wrap it up with you.
Really?
You're going to anchor the program.
We'll see what we can do.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow. Appreciate you guys, and appreciate everybody that came on the show tonight. This isn't a show without those people coming on and putting on an incredible show tonight, and really doing an amazing job spreading that knowledge and helping everybody get excited for the season. So we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us, and take care.